But damn, that took a while. I didn't think it's going to go live. It was like, we've never done that before. Hopefully we'll be able to run tonight without any hiccup. If that's any indication how things are going to go, be a rough one, boys and girls. Welcome to Distilling 101, questions and answers in the Distillers Chat series. Tonight, I think we're going to do something a little different. We're definitely going to still do the question and answer thing, but I've been promising about trying to do an episode where we just kind of break down everything and do everything. So that's kind of what I'm going to try to do tonight is do a brandy. So we're just going to go from the very beginning to the very end. It's not a lot of steps. It's pretty easy. There will be some, there's some variables that are going to change depending on what fruit you use, but we're gonna try to break it all down and make something so everybody can kind of have something to go by when they do it, when they mash in. What's going on, Mr. Hydro Man? What you been up to, Randy? Not seen you in a minute. You've been farming that corn, I hear. Them strawberries. That was awesome, brother. Let's see. Let me move this over here so I can. Damn it, man. Why does it do that? I wanted to move both over. Shit. Hold on. Let me get my. I should do this before I get started. Sitting here going over notes and shit. And I should have just done this from the very get go. But sometimes we do things backwards around here. So just got to grin and bear it sometimes. But anyway, let's turn the volume down there so I can hear myself. What's been going on, Randy? I hear you get fixing to make another trip south of the Moda. Got that fun, brother. So tonight we're going to talk about brandies, A to Z. Let me go ahead and share my links, and then we're going to try to get as far as we can. Wow, that's cool. Opened up Facebook, and I get to see a picture, a memory of 3 years ago. I'm not sure which mash this was. Kind of looks like maybe the banana. It's horrible looking. I can't tell. Maybe let's see. Anyway, let me get that out of the way here. All right, let me share these links first and foremost before I get too far ahead of myself. And I'm already too far ahead of myself. What's going on, Kimbo? All right, let's see how many of those I can share before they shut me down. Same thing, different way. What's up, Curtis? Awesome, brother. Yeah, you better get things in order. You got a lot of oars in the water there. What all you got planted right now? I reckon your strawberries are done. Are they still producing? How's your corn? Awesome, brother. Awesome. Did a little walkabout, huh? I guess that's what they call it down there in Australia, a little walkabout. In America, we call that looking for weed in the woods. We used to go squirrel hunting when I was young because that's about the time all the weed was supposed to be about done. We found a few squirrels on our little walkabouts. Awesome. 5 gallons of strawberry brandy, man, that's good. That'll last you till next year. The way it gets better with time, you know. So as it sits in that jar, it'll give them a tour. That's awesome. Get these links all posted. Haven't stopped me yet. What's going on, Jeff? What's up, Morgan? If y'all stopped in, I may missed it earlier. I been talking. We're going to do Q&A, of course, but we're also going to talk about beginning to end making a brandy. You know, so we're going to start with sourcing the fruit. You know, and I guess we've already started that. So it's always best to, you know, if you got, you know, like Randy here, you got land to grow your own fruit on, and berries. If you do, I can't stress enough how you need to get out there. You need to get out there and while you're young, you know, uh, plant it. Start getting planted. Start growing raspberries, blackberries, blueberries. You know, plant bushes, everything all around your house. You can get you some trees started. I don't know what I've just done here. It's like several of these tabs are all one now. I'm not sure what I've done. Let me go ahead and get the links till it stops me. So far, so good. I may have to post a few here in a little bit after. I probably shouldn't post this. I think it's going to stop me right here. Nope. Let me press my luck. I'm going to kind of wait a minute and post these last ones last. Of course, they will be last. Damn it, my Facebook. I went back to it. I hate how Facebook fucking page changes. You got something on there you want to look at, you go to another tab, you come back, and it changes to a new page. That drives me freaking nuts, man. Change that shit, Facebook. Be better. Do better. Okay, so just a minute. What's something to do with? Let's see. So yeah, well, we got to try to. If you've got trees, plant whatever, you know, tree. Of course, you know, you check your zones and all that, and see what all you can plant in each one, and you know. Just 1 second. Stupid shit I shouldn't have to deal with. Anyway, what's going on, Scott? So if you're young and young, you got some land, plant those trees, man. I mean, all kinds of fruit trees, apple trees, do it, man. Don't wait till you get old and say, I wish I had like me, just get it done. Especially along your fence rows and stuff, plant all that. So get them planted while you're young. If you got time, the bushes and stuff. Still, I mean, even if you're a little older like me, the bushes don't take that long. My grandfather, he planted them up late in his age. He loved going out and picking the berries, and he got Stark. He liked that Stark Fruit Company, so he bought a lot of stuff from them, and they have good quality fruit trees. Pricey, but they had good quality and a lot of dwarf, species and varieties. But yeah, he liked the Stark. But wherever you can get them, get them. I mean, I've started apples from seeds. I've started apple trees from seeds and had some pretty good success with it. So, it's not hard. Just take an afternoon and go out and plant them on the fence rows, and use the fence for trellising. It works great, man. I appreciate that, Randy. Yeah, I enjoy helping. Sharing what knowledge I have. I'm not the hey Lisa, glad you're here. So I just like sharing what I do know, and hope people get something good out of it, and can you know make some decent shine. So as we were talking, finding a good source of fruit is the biggest uh, obstacle for a lot of people. So if you don't have your own trees and bushes and plants, if you can or try to, you got state, I don't know, and I guess maybe parklands is different, but if you've got some state or nationally owned forests, I guess they'll let you go forage in those, and maybe I better check my laws before I tell everybody, but go looking for blackberries and yeah, figs. Scott, we've got quite a few people here that grow a lot of figs. Do the trees grow pretty fast? But mulberries, I know those grow pretty quickly. Hell, I've seen mulberries trees come up pretty quick. I know at the last house I had, there was a wild mulberry tree, and it was on my neighbor's, and it grew up. It's right over my fucking driveway, so that wasn't so bad. But it stained my driveway. But the worst thing is all the birds eating them mulberries, and then come and sit over this. There was a wire that went right over top of my boat, and these some bitches would sit there and they'd shit and put little pink spots on my white boat. Man, I didn't like that at all. Man, that pissed me off. So I complained to them, and they're like, "Eh." So I just cut all the branches off on my side of the fence. Nothing else I can do. I was offered to cut it down, and it wasn't like it was just on the side. It's not like they ever ate the mulberries. They just too lazy to do anything. Thanks, brother. So sourcing the fruit, that's going to be one of the toughest things. So if you fortunate like Randy, and you can you got some land that you can plant strawberries, berries, all that on, do that. If not, you're like Kimbo, take a little walkabout. And we got some land in eastern Kentucky that's got lots of blackberries, wild blackberries on it. Every time we try to take a four-wheeler up the road, man, it tear your legs up. There's so many of them. So, but that's 2.5 hours away. So I guess I gotta wait and check and see when they're prime. Maybe take a little trip, and that's awful. 5 hour round trip for some berries is pretty tough. So if you can drive, pretty close by, if I can find some woods close by to kind of walk around and check, it'd be pretty cool. I appreciate that. Well, no, it's they know, when the rules, and you either follow them or you don't. I guess some people, if they don't follow rules, it makes them feel like an outlaw. Must be the thing. So finding friends that's got trees. A lot of people I know have apple trees and shit, and they're like, man, if you could come get these apples, I would appreciate it. Every time I mow, I get stung by yellow jackets. Just please come get all the apples you want, pick them clean. I've seen people, on the other hand, with fruit trees, it's like, man, that tree's got so full of peaches, man. Can I pick some of them? No, no, no. That's what. And then the storm comes through, and you drive by, and the whole branch, because it was so damn thick, and the wind came and blew the whole damn branch down. There's some karma for you, motherfuckers. Let that thing, and then they just rotted. They never picked them. They never did nothing with them. But a storm took care of that. It split that some bitch in half almost. It big old branch. I mean, they were thick that year. It was a really good year. It's been, I don't know, probably 6, 7 years ago. But yeah, they wouldn't let me pick. But anyway, sourcing cheap fruit. There's also, these secondhand fruit companies and stuff that, they try to pick up a lot of fruit from these grocery stores or from growers, that have some that are, spotted or, got a bruise on them or something like that. That's not retail ready or retailable, but perfectly fine for what we do. That's an excellent source. So if you can find somebody, that has an orchard or something like that, and kind of let them know, that you make jams and jellies, of course, and you cut the bad spots off. They might be willing to help you, help if you actually do make some jam and jelly. Take them a few jars every year and keep them happy and keep the illusion alive. But that's also a good source. We found some wholesalers. I know there's some down close to Texas. I know there's one in Illinois that Mr. Vince went to, and pretty sure some people talk. There's some around, I think, Tennessee or North Carolina somewhere. Somebody was talking about they had one around then. Yeah. So they want all the apples. What's going on, Leroy? Hell yeah, man! I love me some apple butter. Yeah, my ex's mom made some, or well, actually, my ex's grandmother made some pretty mean apple butter, man. She's no longer with us, but boy, she made some damn good apple butter and crap. That was two of the things she made that I liked the best. Crap and her apple butter. Pretty damn good. Yeah, love me some apple butter. But anyway, and the apple butter makes pretty good. If you got some that's a little bit beyond what you want to use to eat, or you got a little extra, you can always infuse with that apple butter. That little apple cider mixed together in your jar rigs, that works pretty good for some apple. So finding some, a good. Yeah, I'm alone every night, brother. Every once in a while, I'll bring on a special guest. I guess July 9th is the next scheduled guest. We'll have Alan Bishop on. That should be a really good night. So if y'all can tune in then for sure, it'd be a great night. Alan's a very great source of information. Great guy, legal distiller, grew up moonshining. So very knowledgeable guy. Very, very knowledgeable guy. One of the two I go to discuss things and ask questions and go over some more complex topics. Him and Wayne, those are very knowledgeable. So finding some wholesalers is a great thing, because really, making brandy can get expensive. If you go to the grocery store to get your fruit, try to you know, everybody asks me what kind of brandy I'm making. It's like whatever's on sale this week, you know, or whatever I can go out and find, because I damn sure not gonna pay full price for it. It just gets too expensive for what it is, what you get. It's just very pricey. I mean, if you got the resources and you know you're fairly well to do, it's not a big deal. But for a lot of us, you know, it's you know, we got to get it different ways, you know. And I try to get it on sale. So, you know, if grapes go 99 cents a pound, that's my, I'll pull the trigger at 99 cents a pound, you know. Maybe $1.29 if they're really good grapes, but pretty much 99 cents a pound. You know, I'll do peaches, you know, when they get cheap, you know, I can get peaches cheap. And I can get some apples cheap. So, you know, I do, you know, apples and peaches. But plums, you know, sometimes when those get on sale, I haven't seen them on sale for last year. Didn't do any last year. It's been a couple since I've done my Slivovitch, my plum wine. So hopefully will do well, and they'll have a surplus this year, and they'll go on sale too. But yeah, this is kind of, it's not like the shit show, Leroy. We generally, you know, here is more of a Q&A. If you've got any questions, you know, we try to field the questions, and we try to, you know, I'm going to try to gear each session towards start to finish, you know. So we're going to talk about tonight about making a brandy. You know, it's not going to be any specific brandy. I'm not going to go over like a recipe or anything like that. I will throw up some charts to show you, you know, roughly how many pounds you should start with, you know, for a wine. Now, to make a true brandy, you should probably use all fruit, and sometimes you need to go to the higher end of the you know number of pounds per gallon of water. Sometimes don't even use water. You know, like if you're making apple brandy, don't use water. Use apple juice, right, and apple cider. So, but make something that doesn't have the preservatives, right? Potassium metabisulfate, potassium sorbate. What's the other one? Is ascorbic acid. There's several different ones that has, you know, preservatives and stuff in there that you know kind of want to steer clear of. But if you can get the 100% juice, and just look on the label, it'll tell you, you know. So sourcing, you know, the cheap fruit is going to be one of the major components, of course, in your decision what you're going to do, and you know, and whether it's feasible for a lot of people. Because again, brandy, you know, is pretty expensive. But we made myself little notes here tonight to kind of my mind tends to wander, so I made little bullet notes here to try to keep me on topic. You know, who knows? I might be talking politics here in a minute. No, I'm just kidding. I try not to do that on here until I get a few in me, and then I might. But let's just go ahead and cross that bridge. I don't have Mark Morgan or Shadow in here to call shots, so I'm gonna have to do it myself. So if you watch me home, I'll take a shot. The peach brandy. Man, I've been drinking that high proof shit, and I've been getting thrush in my mouth. Man, I didn't begin this morning. I woke, drinks that high proof, whatever that tequila Jeff gave me was. Man, that white tequila, man, that shit. I swear to God, that's 155 proof. I guarantee it. I need to put that in hydrometer if I got enough and see. Man, that stuff, it lit me up last night. I was drinking 135 proof, and I think it's what it is, 135 proof. And man, that 135 tasted smooth after that 150. I guarantee it's 150 proof tequila. Man, that shit's. So a few things that you're going to want to get before you get started, you know, making your brandy. You're going to want to get your pectic enzymes and have those ready. You can freeze your fruit, and as we talked in the past, the reason you want to freeze your fruit and the reason you want to use pectic enzymes is all these fruits are made of cells. All right, each cell contains sugars that feed that cell, right? And all those sugars, you know, feed the plant as it's growing underground or on the surface. The leaves fall on it, you know, the process. You know, the fruit falls, it rots, the seed drops into the ground, and all these sugars and everything that are consumed are in the soil around it, right? And it feeds on these things until its sprout reaches the sun. And once its sprout, reaches above the ground, it starts opening those colloidal, leaves and coddle wet leaves or whatever, and it starts photosynthesis. What's going on, Julius? So once this photosynthesis process starts, it doesn't need the energy from the sugars anymore. So that's the whole premise, and that's why all these plants have all these sugars and sweetness, because that gives the plant the energy it needs to get that shoot up and get those leaves open, and now it can start getting its energy from the sun and photosynthesis, right? Still probably will get some of those nutrients in the soil around it as the roots grow, and it'll help feed those and get those roots growing well. But it's pretty much done its job. So each of those cells is sugar. It's what drives it, gives it the energy, right? And if you can bust those cells open, which freezing does, freezing expands the water, this expands the juice inside these cells, just like an ice cube gets big. So when we freeze the fruit, it busts most all these cells. There's some that's not going to get busted, and you can, get a pretty good job out of that. And then you can follow up with pectic enzymes. When you do freeze it like that, you can kind of cut back a little bit on the amount of pectic enzymes you use. So if they say a tablespoon, maybe use 3/4 of a tablespoon or half a tablespoon. You can, because the job's already done. Also, we've talked in the past about like blackberries. Do you need a pectic enzyme with a blackberry? Now, if you macerate those or muddle them and crush them all up and get every little teeny, when you look at a blueberry, or blackberry, it's just a bunch of teeny little berries, all bunched together, right? So if you can smash all those by muddling it or blending it or running it through a food processor or whatever, that's great. You don't even need them because you've done the job. But fleshy fruits, like peaches and apples and bananas and a lot of other fruits that are more fleshy, less juicy. I guess raspberries, blackberries, they're not as critical. A blueberry just has one little, outer shell, and you get to the middle of it, so those aren't going to be as critical. But like strawberries and meaty fruits, it's really good to freeze them. And Michael, it depends on what mash you're doing. We're getting ready to talk about here in a minute about yeast selection. So I will cover that when we get there, brother. So stick with us. We're almost there. So, but in brandies, I used to use pretty much. What's going on, Steve? What's up, Jeff? I was just talking about your white tequila, man. What proof is that white tequila, brother? Man, I took a drink that has to be 150, bro. I drank it 135, and it was smooth compared to that. Man, that shit must be high proof. It gave me thrush. I killed every bite in my mouth. But yeah, I've done. Oh yeah, bakers. I used to use red yeast for everything because I couldn't find anything else. Back in the 70s, 80s. That's pretty much all we. Yeah, it's I guess about 155, 150. Yeah, it's I didn't even think about that. I hit that shit. Ooh, yeah, but I had a little bit of thrush this morning. I had thrush mouth, but I used to use baker's yeast for everything because I couldn't. There was no Amazon, there's no brew stores where I grew up. You went to the grocery store. What's going up, hellbilly? And got what you got. So, did I miss somebody? So anyway, but as time passed and I learned more about uh, the craft, and was able to get more like through Amazon and stuff like that, I definitely choose different yeast. Baker's yeast is perfectly fine for grains. It makes a great beer. Yeah, it smells fine. It's just hot. I'm doing pretty good here, Billy. How about yourself? So we'll get to the yeast in just a second. But so freezing your fruit will help break up those cells and loosen it all. But for a lot of fleshy stuff, it just doesn't cut it. So for blueberries, blackberries, raspberries, and all those that are like that, yeah, it works. It works for that. Yeah. So on a sad note, I drank the last drink of my aged tequila. That was awful damn good. Yeah, I'm glad, brother. Every day I wake up is a good day, man. So, muddling those up, is pretty fine, but fleshy fruits, even if you freeze them, tends to still be mushy when you take them out thaw. If you have any doubts about the effectiveness of pectic enzymes, now don't confuse pectic enzymes with pectin. When you go to the store and you look on the shelf, oh, there's that pectin that he was talking about. No, pectin is a thickening agent, and it's used to um, make jams and jellies. Uh, so what am I saying about? What's going on, Toby? Yeah, yeah, it's pretty cheap for sure. Yeah, your bread yeast and the data yeast, which are very similar, are both pretty inexpensive. They're similar though. Yeah, I told you, man, mine turned out the same way. Since we're talking about jams and jellies, Kimbo just did a run and had some leftovers, and I did this last year, and I had some jams and jellies. We put up a lot of stuff, and this they've been in there a few years. They weren't bad, but they were just kind of lost their good flavor. They wasn't as good, kind of like a freeze and burn. Not ruined, but yeah, do you want to go and eat it? So I dumped all of them, and I had a bunch, man. We had a bunch that we didn't eat. So I guess she needs to make more biscuits, or I need to eat more jelly or something. I don't know. But so we decided, I was going to make me a little mash of it. So I put it in there, added the pectic enzymes, break all that pectin down, and thin it out a little bit. And we went on vacation for a few days. We were gone 4 or 5 days, and I was going to let it have time to work off. I came home and I opened up the lid on the fermenter, and man, as soon as I did, spores of mold and just knocked me down, man. It's like, oh my God, it was just like powder in the air. It got my nose. It makes my nose itch thinking about it, man. But it got in the air. It choked me. Oh my God, it smelled horrible. And I looked down in it, it was like all colors of the rainbow, man. I mean, there's shit growing on it. This is definitely not no lacto, nothing. It was bad, bad. I've done it 40 some years. I ain't never seen nothing like that. And it was one of the few mashes that I've ever thrown away. It is. It's one of the few that yeah, bread yeast can go to, I think 12, 14, somewhere in that area. They're very similar. The bread yeast and dates are similar, but dates it's basically a bread yeast that's been selectively bred and to do higher proof. So it's both Saccharomyces cerevisiae, but it's been selectively bred to cater towards distillers instead of bakers. So they basically took a bread yeast and worked it into a higher proof, higher alcohol tolerant yeast for distilling. But yeah, both of them watch. I'm sorry, I was saying KP saying watching. Both of them work just fine. Glad you're watching, brother. Uh, but yeah, most of your bread yeast to go 10, 12, maybe 14, depending on what it is. I think 14 is the max for most of your bread yeast, but dates, yeah, it's good up to 18, maybe up to 20, 18. I think, EC 1118, I think will reach almost 20, 18 to 20. It's a little higher, but that's more of a champagne. It's actually champagne. But we're getting to yeast, not quite yet. Uh, Man, but I wouldn't doubt it, Kimbo. I mean, I had shit growing all over mine. It was all colors, you know. Yeah, I just had to dump it, man. So mine went out to the woods. Hope the animals didn't eat that shit, because if they did, they're probably tripping. So anyway, once you get all your fleshy fruits mashed in, make do it in two pots. You know, put one bucket with just the fleshy, you know, and do it without pectic enzymes, and do another one with pectic enzymes. You know, so leave one alone, don't do anything to it, and then the other one add pectic enzymes to, and stir it in, you know, add your water or juice, fruit juice, and or frozen concentrate water. uh, I try not to just dilute it too much with water. Instead, if I can use a fruit juice that doesn't have, you know, any of the preservatives and stuff in it, I'll tend to use a fruit juice, because it doesn't dilute it down as much, which is what you do when you add the water. When I add water or juice, I heat it up to about 160 plus degrees. That way, I'm killing any bacteria um, on there that might proliferate later, and you know, I also want to kill any wild yeast that's on there. We're going to get to yeast though, so yeah, Leroy, we're getting there. I want to finish talking about pectic enzymes. Then we're going to talk about yeast nutrients, and then we're going to talk about yeast. So stick with me, brother, and we will have a pretty good segment on yeast. I just don't want to get ahead of myself, because I always do that and I forget where I'm at. So make a separate bucket with just like peaches. You know, so do your peaches and water in one bucket with 160 plus degrees, peach juice, whatever, and pour over it to kill everything off. And in the other one, do the same thing, but in this one, after it cools, throw in some pectic enzymes, and you know, scale it down for each bucket. Just a little test. You know, you can do it in a jar. You can take one peach in a jar with a little bit of water, and another peach in another jar with a little bit of water. Muddle them up, mix them up real good, make them, you know, a goo out of it, and put pectic enzyme in one of them and not in the other, and and that'll what do I have in the vessel right now? I've got blackberry brandy. Um, so try to jar it just to see the effectiveness of pectic enzymes and how they work, and you will be amazed at how it will break every bit of it down. I've done that a lot. I've done that a lot, brother. There's been a lot of my wines that never made it to shine. I bottled them some bitches up. Yeah. Yeah. Pectin is what we use in jam making and jellies. It's a thickening agent, and it what makes it turn to gel, right? So the pectin is for jam and jelly making, and the pectic enzyme does the opposite. It's a thinning agent, so it thins it down. Basically, the pectic enzyme, they go in there and they eat the cell wall. So like in you're freezing it, you know, it busts it up and breaks it up, and that does great for like blackberries, raspberries, and all those like we talked about. But for fleshy fruits, try pectic enzyme. Do a little experiment, like I said, in two different jars with the peach, and use the pectic enzymes in one and in the other, or watermelon or strawberries or anything else you want to. But you will be amazed at how well those pectic enzymes, they eat the cell wall. So they eat all the the fiber basically that surrounds all these cells, you know, the actual cell wall. Um, and that will help release all those sugars in each of the cells, kind of like the freezing letting it explode from expansion, expanding water in those busting the cell open. You can do that by using the pectic enzymes. It chews into the cells. It eats the cell walls. No, you're fine, brother. No, you're fine. Yeah, a lot of my wines never make it to brandies, man. It goes to the bottle. I've got cases of great wine in there. So after we've added our pectic enzyme, so we've taken our fruit, we've mashed it up, bottled up fruit, frozen it. Now here we'll show you. Oh Lord, I got off my damn page last night sharing stuff. Let me find my file where I keep all my charts. I'm gonna have my charts here to show you. Okay. No. It's the memento. Okay. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so here we go. Let me do something real quickly here. I've got a second. I want to do a few quick shares here. So this chart here basically shows how much sugar is in each of the fruits. So the fruits that are lower on the chart, you're going to want to maybe add some sugar, some frozen concentrate to these guys down here. Some sugars are frozen concentrate. I can't believe they did that. So some of these down here, when we muddle it up, you're going to be able to tell, just with the fruit alone, it's going to be tough to get a higher gravity. It's tough to get a high gravity with like grapefruit juice unless it's got sugar in it. There we go. Increased it. So the figs, a lot of us do the figs. I've got a lot of people out there doing figs. Not a lot of sugar in them, so you definitely want to use some pectic enzymes with those that will help get a lot of that out. I know figs are very fleshy, so getting it out is going to be, going to be tough other than using pectic enzymes. All right, man. Yeah, it's like a model, man. I got my fan going. It's like my hair's in the breeze and everything. It's like one of them Hollywood models. And that little lost center there. Where's the other way? Oh, okay. Yeah, that little fan's got me blowing, man. Yeah, Toby, I know you're the master of dad jokes. Bad dad jokes. Toby got hammered last weekend, man. He was tickled. All right, so each, let me see here. It'll show. I've got another chart here that I like to share, and let me see where that is. If I can find it in here. Here we go. Now this right here will show this how many pounds of a given fruit per gallon of water. Now this is just a general rule. This is for winemaking, so it doesn't mean you have to. I've had a lot of people, well, I'll use a lot more than that, or hell, I've never used that many. There's nothing set in stone. You could use one fucking grape and a bag of sugar and you still call it a grappa, but it's going to be a sugar shot, right? So there's a point where you end up using more sugar than the sugars you're getting from fruit, and you're kind of getting away from brandy, and you're just flavoring the sugar sign, right? Same thing with corn. A lot of people don't gelatinize and convert corn with enzymes. They just heat up the corn and then throw in some sugar with it and distill it, which I'm not knocking. I did that for 30 fucking years. I took sugar, I took cornmeal, and I cooked it up and threw in some yeast, and that was pretty much all I did. So uh, I've got lots of hair. Look here, buddy. Look here. I got a whole head of hair. It's ginger, man, and I got a little receding hairline. I ain't got much hair as you, man. He's got hair all over, man. He's just he's got that mad scientist look, man. I need Toby's hair. So this give you a general guide, like apples. Some people, my understanding is it takes 22 pounds of apples to make 1 gallon of juice. So that shows you. Are you out here, brother? Have a good, my friend. Hope y'all. Did you get a chance to see Phil today? So for like bananas, if it's green, you're gonna need 5, maybe more. But if it's yellow with spots, these should be good. If it's black, maybe over to here. So, but with bananas, what happens is the darker they get, I guess, the more sugars they built up, and the enzymes can convert them. So you get some more fermentables with a dark, basically like when you're making banana bread. Hey, you want them to get dark. But spotted, I think spotted might yield better flavor. And you definitely want to use some enzymes. So any fruits that are starchy, kind of like a banana and some other fruits, you can use alpha amylase and beta amylase or glucoamylase, to help break those starches down and get fermentable sugars out of them, right? So, it's not just for grains. I've had a lot of people that made vodka and they never used the enzymes. I'm like, bro, you're not getting all the starch conversion you need, man. There's a lot of sugar still left in those. So, let's try using alpha and gluco and they're like, wow, I didn't have to add as much sugar this time. It definitely made a difference, and it does, and it makes a difference in the flavor too. So, but yeah, for fruits that have a lot of starch, you can Google it. Starch content. It'll let you know what content, starch content your fruit will have, or tubers or anything else that you do. So if you got some like potatoes or sweet potatoes or anything like that, yeah, you can definitely use some enzymes on those. So once we've selected our fruit, we've got it all frozen, we've got it broken up. Now we know how many pounds roughly that we're going to put in the fermenter. So if we're wanting to do a 10 gallon mash, you'll need 30 pounds of melon, or you need 160 pounds of apples. It's crazy, isn't it? So maybe 70, but thanks a lot, man. There's not a lot in those apples. So I mean, you got some sugars in there though. Definitely got a lot of sugars in your apples, but that ain't no granny, crab apple either. That's a good sweet apple. So I guess that's why, the apples have such a large swing there, is because some of those apples aren't a lot of sugar. These don't have much sugar. These will have more sugar, so you get by with less, right? So okay, so we know basically how many pounds. So we're going to mulch all these up. We're going to grind them. For apples, I tell you what, I saw a dude. You got a baby, then yeast, man. You want to feed them well, and you got to give them nutrients too. So we'll talk about that in a minute too. The nutrients, a lot of people think, oh, the yeast won't need nutrients because this is a fruit, right? No, you're going to still need your nutrients because a lot of fruit, it does have a lot of minerals and it has a lot of stuff that the yeast will like for sure. There's a lot of things in there that'll make it happy, but it needs yin and fan. We talk about that a lot, and that's something that you need to put in your dictionary and read up on because determining whether or not you need nutrients depends on the yin and fan. And yeast assimilable nitrogen and ferment free amino nitrogen. So yan and fan got myself confused there. So yan and fan, you definitely want to look at everything. If you're doing grains and you've got malted grains, forget about it. You're not going to need, you're not going to need nutrients because in a malted grain, it's got the yan and fan that you need and all the other things that you need. There's nothing wrong with supplementing it. I know a lot of people hooked on this tomato paste, and there's some things in there that are beneficial. I wouldn't waste my money on it. But people put in aspirins, and those fine if you want it, or not aspirins, vitamins. People put vitamins in there, which is fine, but you want to make sure that you don't get a lot of iron. Iron is not good for fermentation, and that's one of the reasons why we really don't want enriched flours and enriched meals, because a lot of times they enrich it with iron, and that's definitely not something you want in your fermentation. It's not good. No blame. What's going on, Kenny? So you definitely, yeah, you got to have your yin and yang, man. Make all your yeast happy. It makes the whole world go around. But read about the yin and fan. Um, it's definitely important, and and it's your feeding is a lot like a plant. You can treat this a lot like a plant. And plants need nitrogen, and these yeast are like a little plant group, so they need that nitrogen. And those are the two sources of nitrogen that you want, the yin and fan, the types. And but if you do like an all corn, there's really not, unless it's malted corn, there's not a lot of yin and fan in that corn. So it wouldn't hurt to put a little bit of, I'm not saying the full amount, because you definitely don't want to use too much. Too much is as bad as none or not enough. So it's better to underdo it than to overdo it on the nutrients, because it can impart, especially if it's a wine, 100%, it can impact the flavor of your wine for sure. Distill it maybe a little bit, but it's just not good to do. Don't overfeed. So a lot of times it's good to kind of look and see how much or if any of the nitrogen is available, and if none, then I'd probably go about 3/4 of what they recommend. I never use what they recommend. And as far as nutrients, uh, just get on Amazon or eBay or wherever. Go to your local brew store. Uh, they've got Fermax, Fermade, Fermo, DAP is what most people use, diammonium phosphate. But Fermax pretty much I think Fermax is pretty much DAP with a bit of dextrose in it to help it along. So I like just getting pure diammonium phosphate. I've got my own. I got my own sweeteners. If I want to add dextrose to it, I will. Because I think half that pound might be dextrose, the other half diammonium phosphate with your Fermax and your Fermades. So I tend just to get the straight DAP and stay away from that other stuff, and use a little less what they call for, and it works out well. So that's another thing that you got to have. So we've got our bag of pectic enzymes here. We got our bag of yeast nutrients, your DAP there. Now we talk about the yeast. All right, this is where everybody's been wanting to talk about. Starting off, any yeast will work. pretty much any yeast will work fine. The 1060, 1080 is, a gravity much lower than what even bread yeast will do. So we're not pushing it. So we're not sweetening it up to, 1.1. We're 1060, 1080 in that range. I know some people push their brandies a little higher with sugars, um, and wines, and to get a higher alcohol content wine, which is fine. Um, just don't overdo it, and try to get too much and get greedy, because it won't make a good wine, and it will produce a little more brandy, but it's not going to be as good a brandy, right? It's not going to be a good quality of brandy. Um, well, that's the same thing, Hillbilly. That LD Carlson DAP is what I use. It's good. They call it Fermax. I don't think it's got, I'm not tasting the shit. I'm not putting that in my mouth, but I don't, straight. I don't think it's got you can ask them, what percentage, message them in LD Carlson, ask them how much dextrose is in that. See if I might have to make me enough to do that. But yeah, that's what I use, and it probably does have dextrose in it, but they call it Fermax, but on the package it does say DAP, so I'm not sure, if they've got some confusion there. Diammonium phosphate and Fermax. Technically, Fermax is DAP with some additives. I guess I'm gonna have me another drink. Good peach. Well, not real peachy, but so we've yeast selection. There are a lot of different yeasts out there, and a lot of people say it doesn't matter what yeast you use, and that could be further from the truth. So anytime somebody says that, it's either they're an old shiner and all they make is pretty much a grain corn liquor, and they've used bread yeast like I did for many, many, many moons, and it doesn't matter to them because bread yeast works great. Everything works fine. They get a great end product. So to them, it doesn't matter, because that's just what they use. So there's not a lot of choice, not a lot of selection. Fleischmann's or Red Star, or what's that other? What's that one that comes in the little bag? Man, my mind. It's a red. Anyway, bread yeast works fine. It's probably not the best choice, but it all comes down to taste. And when things come to taste, it comes to opinions. So, what I have to say about what yeast use, or I'm just going on my taste and my opinion, and there's no fact in this, okay? There are a few facts as far as alcohol tolerance, you know, that's pretty much empirical. You can test it, it'll hold 18 to 20, boom, it kills it off. So, there's some facts to it, but when it boils down to yeast selection, it boils down to opinions and flavors and tastes. If you have the opinion it doesn't matter, then you haven't tried a lot of yeasts and tried them with the similar mashes and gotten different flavors out of them, especially with wines. When you make wine and beer, yeast means a lot. It's less significant when you're distilling, because distilling tends to take out a lot of these flavors, right? But it does still matter when you distill, and it also matters how dry you let it get when you ferment it, even if you distill it. So Saf is the one I think you have, Billy. That's the one I love. You're right, brother. Got that mind mail going on here. So what I have to say about yeast is all opinion and based on my opinions. Now, I haven't tried a ton of different yeast. I'm broadening my horizons as we go. I've still not done the yellow label I've been promising to do, and I need to do now that it's 90 fucking degrees. So we go from 70, the 60s and 70s and 50, high 50s at night. And then I had like a week opportunity of decent, perfectly normal temperatures to ferment in that I was busy. And now this week it's going to be mid 90s all fucking week. So it's going to be hot as fuck. So if you got some tequilas out there, that'd be a pretty good time to do your tequila wash outside this fucking week because it's going to get hot. Yeah, I love Red Star Distillers yeast. That's Red Star 80 is what I use a lot with my grains. That's my go-to grain. I don't know. Now I've got some different yeast. I've got some firm solution FSI 927 to try. I've got the angel yeast to try. Also, you can't forget about the Kveki yeast. They work off really quick and have really good flavor. But for my wines and brandies, I tend to use three basic yeast. I use a Red Star Premier Blanc for my white grapes, for my peaches, for anything light colored fruits, any light colored fruits. I'll use the Red Star Premier Blanc. And then for my dark colored fruits, I use that Red Star Premier Rouge. And for like dark wines, cherries, things like that, all the dark fruit, plums, for my plum wines and all those. So both of those are really good yeast for fruits, and they're kind of selectively bred for each type of fruit. And the Premier Blanc is French for white, I guess, or light colored white, I think. Mont Blanc in there. So I think it's white, but for your lighter colored yeast, that Premier Blanc is good, and Rouge I think is red, French for red. So the Premier Rouge is for your red and dark fruits, and so those are kind of selectively bred for each different colors of fruits and stuff. So they work really well as far as the flavors and stuff. For beginners, it's an excellent starting place. And for advanced as well. I mean, it's damn good yeast for that wine. For like my Sweet Heat, which is a white wine that I make for my Grappa with white grapes. I use that Premier Blanc. So that was one of my secrets to my famous Grappa. But for the dark fruits, the Premier Rouge. But I also, when in doubt, or if I get a stuck fermentation or anything happen, the Lalvin EC1118 is excellent. Really, Hellbilly, man, we're getting it, man. This week it's going to be in the mid 90s every day, and I got to mow grass before I did today. I was lazy today. But the EC1118 is an excellent to get unstuck. And if you just want to buy one yeast for all your brandies, I think you couldn't go wrong with an EC1118. Thing with that is, though, that EC1118 will finish dry. So if you want to make a sweet wine, and if you're going to do wine, there's a couple of other things that you need to add to bags that you get. Potassium metabisulfate, and this is something that's used to kill off any bacteria, any issues, any things like that. It'll kill them off. Any bacteria, molds, anything like that. That potassium metabisulfate is basically a Campden tablet. So if you read a little bit about some of your recipes, may talk about Campden tablets. That's basically potassium metabisulfate. So Um, you can stop fermentation with that because it kills yeast too. So if your yeast or if your wine is getting down and it's still a little bit sweet and a little bit dry, but still sweet, and this is right where you want it to get, you probably should have added it a little bit sooner. So give it time to work. So if you're getting down to like 1.010 or 1.005 and you're getting close to, being completely dry, you can add that potassium metabisulfate and it just kills everything off so you won't get any more fermentation going. I know that's kind of foreign to a lot of distillers because that kind of defeats the purpose. You want to get that extra alcohol production, but in winemaking, it makes a big difference, and it also makes a difference in your distilling later because if you take not a super sweet wine, but I'm talking about just a little bit of sweetness to it there at the end. If you take that versus a really dry wine that finished it out and it's 0.009 something, 96, where it's just dry as fuck. There's no sugars left in there. If you distill those, that dryness distills over. So, oh, well, who didn't see that coming? We're the only ones with bunker busters, and they started a war with us a long time ago. They've had jihad against us for a long time, but that's for another podcast. We'll talk about that on the shit show, or maybe Dane and I have been talking about wanting to do a podcast about politics and all that stuff. And I don't know, everybody has opinions on things, and I value other people's opinions, whether I agree with them or not. Free country, people have the right to their opinions and protest. If somebody wants to protest, I'm behind them 100%. I may not agree with what they're saying or doing, but as long as they're peaceful, we have to understand that they have their right to speech just like we do. So we can't selectively say we have a right to speech because I agree with my speech, but they don't have a right to speak their piece because I disagree with them. No, we have to appreciate everybody has the right to, speak on whatever, they want to. But I will say, once it becomes not peaceful, then it's Katie bar the fucking door through your ass and it's time to get slammed. And you throw a fucking rock at a cop or at a guardsman or somebody like that, they should shoot you on the fucking spot. That's my thoughts. Because you can kill somebody with them big rocks they're slinging or bricks or whatever. So, don't, peaceful, fine. But the second you endanger law enforcement or the guardsmen or the military, I'd shoot the motherfuckers on the spot, just like they say in Florida. We're going to be notifying your next of kin. But if you want to exercise your free speech, stay on the fucking road, stay on the fucking sidewalks, let people walk. Stay in the area that you're designated that you can do your free speech in, and let your free flags fly, man. I don't care. Don't burn the flag. I don't agree with that. They say it's free speech. I don't like it. You should have more pride in your country than that. If you don't, get the fuck out, right? So I shouldn't be getting in this. I get a little fired up, but I do agree with people. I may not agree with what they're saying, but they do have a right to protest if they don't like what somebody's doing. We protest just the same. So everybody's got a right to voice their opinions, but just remain peaceful and everything's fine. Yeah, it may be time to get fired up, man. I mean, when they get violent, you know, yeah, it's time to meet with kind. So they throw some rocks or bricks, and it's time to drop them where they stand and make an example out of them. Because they see that all these little protesters that go out there and they're just doing it for attention, or they're being paid to do it. They don't even care about the cause most of the times, because they really can't. I don't want to get too political, but a lot of the LGBTQ community and a lot of women, are standing up for Hamas. Really, how they treat women and people in the LGBTQ community over there. I don't think you'd be standing up for him if you knew. So obviously, a lot of these people are very uneducated on how the world is, and they have a normalcy bias because they really don't understand how these people are and how they treat people. Um, Not want to get too far off, but uh, yeah, yeah. So maybe, but I don't want to, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that disagree with me politically, and I don't want them to say, Santa's a right winger. I'm not a Trump lover. I didn't like Trump when he did The Apprentice. You're fired and all that. I thought he was a pompous ass, but I kind of like the way he trolls a lot of the media when they try to use propaganda and control the narrative and create a false narrative. I like the way he does that. So I'm not a big Trump lover. I like the fact that he's pro-America and he's getting shit done and he's not able to be bought off. And if that bothers people, then I guess there were people that were bought off, and or brainwashing. And I understand. I've got family members that don't talk to me because of how I think, and that's fine too. It's my opinion. They don't understand that I'm entitled to it, and they want to be that way. That's fine. Uh, but I'm pro-American, and I don't like how they use the term nationalist like it's a bad thing. He's a white nationalist. They try to think white nationalist as like a skinhead or something, because that's what the media wants you to. That's what they want you to see when you hear that word, right? That's why you've been impounded your whole life. Every time you hear the word white nationalist, you see a skinhead Nazi, right? That's not the case. The nationalist is somebody that's pro-country, period. Black nationalists, they try to make the black nationalists the Black Panthers. They were all, killing whitey back in the days. And they're trying to make all nationalism seem bad because they don't want nationalism. That's going to stop their world order plan, right? So that is their agenda. It's a fact. And it's not just Democrats. There's some Republicans as well that are on the take and want that global rule. And so, but that's for another time. But don't let them call a nationalist. Don't nationalism is not racist. It's not racist. Or there's nationalists in the military, or military's full of them. They're all proud of America. That's why they joined the military. There's lots of blacks, Asians, Mexicans, they're Latino, whites, all colors in the military, and they're all nationalists. They're all pro country, and that's what a nationalist is. So don't let them brainwash you into thinking nationalism is a bad thing. It's not fascism at all. Is you put your country first before other countries. It's pride in your country. So back to the topic, yeast. That's where we were. Uh, that's right. Nationalism is patriotism. That's a fact. So there's lots of nationalists all over. Anyway, yeast selection. So there's lots of yeast, Kveki yeast. That's a great, excellent grain yeast. Uh, Works off really quickly. Great yeast. Let's see, the D47 makes a great mead. I know a lot of people use it for other things, but it's a great yeast to use with. It's a Lalvin D47. It's great to use, and I think they've got a V1116 that's similar to the EC1118, but it's got some different flavors, gives you some different notes, and it's good to use in brandies as well. So those are some basic yeast that you can get off Amazon. There's a lot of selective yeast. Again, if you want to go to like a Firm Solution um, out of Danville, Kentucky, yeah, well, whatever color you are is what you are. So if you're a black man and you're proud of your country and you fight for your country, it doesn't matter. You're a nationalist. You're not a black nationalist. You're a nationalist. And if you're white and you're a nationalist, you're just a nationalist. Don't let them peg those colors, Clint. They got us pegging nationalism with colors, and that's how that race they've added that racism. Yeah, and so we're just nationalists, period. And that's like calling somebody an African American. Well, most blacks weren't even born in Africa. They've never been there in their lives. So why do they call them African Americans anymore? They're fucking Americans, right? I don't call myself an Irish American or a Scottish American. I'm American. So yeah, that's right. So anyway, there's lots of different yeasts out there that we can try. Some people experiment with wild yeast, and that's a mixed bag. It's kind of a gamble. Some wild yeast are excellent, some aren't so good. They tend to work off quickly, so you generally can't depend on them alone because they don't have the alcohol tolerance, they don't have the pH tolerance, and they tend to work off pretty quickly and leave a lot of sugar behind, right? They don't. I guess they're not reproducing well because of the environment. That may have gotten a little acidic or gotten a little alcohol and it's just killed them off, so they're not reproducing anymore and they're still sugars. So, maybe starting out with the wild yeast and then finishing with something else works. Or maybe you can selectively, use your, wild yeast and carry it over each time and develop an alcohol and pH tolerance for it. That's how they do it. That's how they've done corn. Corn started as a grass with a little seed pod on it. And they took that seed pod, selectively bred it over thousands of years to create corn. They started out with little baby corns and now and big old ears of corn. So all corn was selectively modified to increase the size of the corn. So the ones that did well, they'd save those seeds. The ones that didn't do well, they'd pitch them, or grind them up to meal. So as time passed, they kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger because they selectively bred the biggest, the strongest, the largest, and threw the puny ones away, and through genetics, it is genetically modified. So people say that they've got non-GMO corn, haven't really researched how corn got started because all of it technically is genetically modified. Now they do have a new moniker. What's going on, Chad? What's up, brother? So they've got a new one. So instead of genetically modified, what do they call it? Bioengineered. So because GMO really didn't quite meet the criteria of bioengineering, so that's basically scientifically changing the genetic makeup of something to make it better, right? So they go in there and they start splicing off these genes and changing it genetically to make certain things. And I think they do that with a lot of corns to keep, bugs off of it, to make it more drought tolerant, things of that nature. So I think they bioengineer some of that. So not all GMO is bioengineered, and it's not worked quite so heavily. So a lot of people are afraid of GMO because what in their mind that's more of a bioengineered thing. So Steve George Washington from the book I read, the stories. I'll have to check it out. Yeah, you can. That's a fact, Clint. Uh, well, you're still a patriot to America. America doesn't lie, man. America's our country, brother. America doesn't lie. It's politicians that do that, and it's people that do that, and it's lack of law and order because of crooked politicians that allow that. But you're a patriot of America. You just don't like the politicians. So stay proud of America, brother. But just it's the politicians that you got to hate. There is corruptions on both sides. That's a fact. But I'm a patriot to America. I'm a nationalist. I love our country. There's never been a better country in the world. And the sooner we can get back to the old ways and law and order, uh, the better we'll be. All this corruption and taking from the taxpayers, and it's the government, and the corruption. It's not America, So you are a patriot. You just not a fan of the politicians. So we have to do better at the elections. A lot of times we're stuck with the choices that we're given, and that's something I have an issue with. It's the choices that we're given, and a lot of people, we can't do this. I don't want to I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, man. But maybe Dana and I will maybe have a. We've been talking about doing a podcast on Jar of Truth, and maybe we'll do something like that. Is that something y'all would like to get involved in? And for us to have a political podcast and everybody come in and talk about what they think. I mean, I know if I do that, there's going to be some people that hate me because I might say some things that's going to hurt their feelings, because I'm brutally honest. So I don't know. Maybe we've been talking about it. Yeah, I mean, the Stars and Stripes, America, I love, but I know what Steve's coming from. He's not against America. He's against the politicians, and and they represent America. But we need to change our representation. We need to get rid of that. And we may have some people in here from there's a lot of people from a lot of walks of life. This is podcast all over the world. We got members from all over the world, and they don't really care about the politics. They like drinking just like we like drinking, and I know, brother, and that I know, and yeah, Steve's been doing that a long time. He's a patriot, but he's fed up with the corruption, and it doesn't seem like it's getting fixed. He's run an underground press for a long time, and he got you know blocked and stuff, and they wouldn't show a lot of his stuff a lot of times. And but corruption. Yep. Yeah, we different. I don't hate Russians. I don't hate Muslims. I don't hate. I don't hate anybody except the corrupt. All this AIG money got misappropriated. Uh, yeah, man, it's corrupt. And that wasn't the United States. That was yeah. I'll talk to Damon. Maybe we'll do this another one. I don't want to get too far off topic, and I want to try to keep this distilling. And where are you guys on Friday night, man? Y'all need to bring your shit in Friday night. We'll talk about it on the shit show, man. That's what it's for. We can air out our dirty laundry and talk about shit, whatever we want to talk about. And maybe Damon and I'll do this jar of truth thing we've been talking about, pushing around. Because Damon and I disagree politically on a few things, uh, but I think fundamentally most of us all agree. Uh, in fact, I think you could take all these, except for the paid protesters and the clowns that really don't have an opinion. They're just there for attention and because, you know, their mamas didn't breastfeed them or some stupid shit Freud would tell. But uh, yeah, maybe we'll do that. But anyway, back to yeast. Um, so yeast selection can have a major impact on your flavor, especially if you're making wines and beers. So you have to choose. Yeah, let's just have strength. Get back on topic. So you got to really. Yeah, I can't do that. 55. Yeah, give me just 130. Yeah, that 130, 135 is a little spicy too, but man, that 150 lit me on fire last night. I took a big old swig of that. I'd forgotten how hot that was. But yeah, I don't have any issues with people. You know, fundamentally, everybody wants the same thing. It's our governments and our representatives that are corrupt. I know there's some religious ideologies, and I'll go ahead and put it out there. If your religious ideology says kill others that don't believe the way you believe, that's not a good religion. You know, I'm sorry, but that's not a religion of tolerance and love and understanding. So I think religion should be based on tolerance, love, and understanding. And if your religion isn't, then we probably need to find a new religion. And if your religion, you know, says that you want to kill me as a Christian, then we have some fundamental issues, you know, that get resolved one way or the other. So, but once we've got all our fruit mashed up and our pectic enzymes have, now I'm starting to get a little tipsy. Pectic enzymes have done their work. It's time to add a little bit more water. It's time to, before we add the water, we're going to get a gravity reading, right? So we're going to pull out that triple scale hydrometer and we're going to get a reading, you know, and it's going to tell us if or how much sugar we need to add. So if you get done with all that, you can use some concentrated, frozen mix, or you can use the juice mix. Then those have some sweetener, some sweet in it, some sugars in it, and you won't dilute your wine or your beer. So all right, guys, let's get back on topic. We will though. We will. And if you want to talk, politics, we'll definitely maybe do us a little show on a Monday or something, and or Tuesday or whatever. Not Freight's not doing it. Militia, we try not to. We don't overlap. So everybody's got their shows that they post to the group, and so there's certain nights that they're open that we can do it, but we won't podcast over top of each other. That's one more rule we won't do. So we don't want people having to choose between one or the other. We want people to be able to watch both. So we'll see what day we can do that on. I know Fred was thinking about changing one of his days, and I don't think he did. So maybe Tuesday would be the day, or Monday, one of those days that he's not using. We may do it or something like that, or may do it at a different time of day. So keep that in mind, and that's something we can all definitely. Yeah, I agree, David. I'd like to keep it on top because I know basically fundamentally most of us all agree on the fundamentals of it, but we may have some differences on other things that we can discuss and in a peaceful manner. As long as it's peaceful, I think people should be able to talk about anything they want. So anyway, we've got our fruit, we've got it all muddled up, we've added our pectic enzyme, we've allowed that to sit. Now the water, this is one of the mistakes a lot of people make, and is they don't pH their water before they add it to their fruit, right? They wait until it's yeast time to do the pH changing, we'll just say. And that's not what you want to do. Now this is for grains as well as brandies, and this does help conversion. So it's something that most, I'd say probably 80-90% of the people out there in the hobby make this mistake. And if you listen tonight, you learn it, you'll know something, you'll have a little clue. You'll have a little head start on them. Conversions work better when your pH is around 5.3 as well. I know yeast like that temperature, but the enzymes and everything that are converting your grains or some of your fruits over that we've talked about earlier that have starches in them that can be converted. You want to adjust your pH on the water that you start with. So I mean, I talk about even if it's juice. So the juice, if you're using frozen concentrate water, if you're using fruit juice, if you're using just, water, tap water, whatever, the reason a lot of people like the spring water, and stuff is because the pH is generally buffered with calcium and, got all that in it. And we'll talk about that in a minute. We'll talk about also adding the oyster shells like we talk about. But you want to lower the pH of the water that you add from the very get-go. So when you're converting, best thing to use citric acid. That's another bag that you need to have. So we talked about yeast nutrients. We need that bag of pectic enzymes. We need that bag of nutrients. And now we got a bag of citric acid. Citric acid is something you're going to use a lot to lower pH. You're going to use it a lot. You can use it to in making jams and jellies as well. And you can also use it in cleaning your copper, so it gets a lot of uses. You can use lemon juice and replace that, whatever it is on hand, but it's cheap. Citric acid, a bag of it's cheap to have. It's just something you need. Winemaking is something, it's a must. Must. So that's another tool in your arsenal you definitely have to have is a bag of your citric acid. So you want to lower the pH of that water to 5.3 or so before you do your conversions, or that hot water or juice. pH. Add the citric acid to your juices, whatever. Get it down to 5.3-ish. It doesn't have to be exact. 5.5, 5.1, 5.6, whatever. Doesn't have to be exact. Just has to be more acidic, and it actually helps conversions. So when you're doing your grains, do that, and when you're doing your wines, do it. And it literally, most people do not do that. They wait till it's yeast pitching time because they've always been told that it's a yeast only thing, that yeast prefer that, and it's a bacterial thing, and it is both of those, but it also helps in conversions. Fact. So add some citric acid, get it down there, and it'll prevent you from having to add it later, before you add your yeast. So we've got our yeast, or our yeast ready to add. We've already put our pectic enzymes in there. We've checked our gravity. Our gravity is 1040, so we're going to have to add some sugar, right? So we're going to take a little water with 5.3 or 5.5-ish, whatever. We're going to boil it. We're going to take whatever sugars we want to use, whether it's dextrose, whether it's table sugar, whether it's vanilla, there's a whole host, honey, whatever you want to use, molasses, but we're talking about brandy. So most people just use a common table sugar. It's cheap, it's easy, and it works fine. I've done it a million years. If you got a little dextrose, it's easy to use. Yeast love it. That works great too. I generally use dextrose because it's the yeast like it. It's a monosaccharide. Yeast dig it, and it's easy for them to consume. But if you've got sugar, and if it's going to be a lot that you're going to need to add, like if you're talking major poundage, and you got a lot of fruit, then it might be more economical to use some sugar instead of the dextrose. There's other sugars out there that are cheap. The Morena Zulka, Morena sugar we've talked about, works great. It's really good. You can invert sugar, which also works well, and that's another use for your citric acid. Is when you do the sugar inverting, you have to have your acid to break that bond, right? And to help, well, it trying to find the proper term. It's it speeds up the process. I'm catalyst. That's the scientific version. It's a catalyst. So the acid in there, double IPA, awesome. So where was I? I got my mind off. So all right, we're adding sugar. So whatever sugar that you want to add is fine. It's again opinion. Some might be a little less hot than others, uh, but it's whatever you have on hand and what you can afford. Not everybody can afford to buy a big old huge bag of dextrose if you're going to be taking pounds of it. I use it in grains that I've done, like a conversion on. And usually I can get my conversions pretty good. And if I need to bump them up just a little, I can use a few cups or maybe half a pound or something of the dextrose, and it's not that expensive to use that way. But if it were something where I needed, 20 pounds of, no, I'm not using dextrose. I'm going to use some sugar. I use the Zolca Morena. I get that stuff pretty cheap, uh, unless it's like a rum or something like that, and I'll use the dark brown sugar and some molasses or something like that. But so we're checking our gravity, and we're now. I will go back. If you're one of those people that don't want to add the boiling water over, you can use Camden tablets, and I know a lot of wine recipes will have this in it. So I want to add it because I don't want people, oh, you forgot this. Not everybody uses it. It's potassium metabisulfate is Camden tablets, and you can use it before you add your pectic enzyme, right? So you've got your mash, everything, you've checked your gravity, everything's good, you've added your sugar, everything's good, you're ready to go. Turbinado is great. Yep, that's great sugar to use as well. Even the cane sugar, the cane syrup, there's a lot of different, corn syrups, there's lots of different sweeteners. Um, we could do a whole segment on that alone, because there's a lot of really good, ones to use, and some of them are kind of specific, right? So if we're going to do meads, of course, we're going to have melomels or meads. We're going to have honey. If we're going to make rum, then we're going to have some, at least some brown sugar, if not some blackstrap. We're going to have some molasses of some sort in there. So, a lot of times the sugars or the sweeteners or the starches that you pick, carbs, whatever that you pick, are going to be based on your mash. So vanilla, yeah, there's just so many good ones. Vanilla is a good one. So and especially with like rums, a dark brown sugar or vanillas, and some of those is really great with the molasses and combination with molasses. They work really good. But that the vanilla, the morena, all of those are more raw, less refined sugars. A lot of the white sugars have been refined to be white. Back in the day, they used to bone char sugars to get them to the white point. I'm not sure if they use that process anymore. I'm sure some do, but I think there's other processes that refine the sugar. And in the refining of the sugar, a lot of times they take out a lot of things that we do want. So, but whatever sugar you use, we're adjusting the hydrometer at this point. So after you adjust your sugars, if you want to crush up your potassium metabisulfate, mix those in, after you poured the boiling water. Doing great, brother. How's it going? We're talking about brandies. You may have to watch the show from here out and then rewind it to catch the first part. But we're going through basically step to step a decent brandy mash. And we're not going to get specific to any specific fruit, but we're just going to try to keep it general. There's plenty of recipes out there. I've got books of recipes that I can share. I can put in the militia file pages, the DIY file pages, and for everybody to watch and check out. There's lots of recipes. I'm going to try to focus on recipe books, just because they tend to be more tried and true, and also a lot of the recipes that you see. I know JB Wagmaker puts out a lot. He gets some from other sources. He'll put his stamp on it so other people can't steal it when he stole it. And some originals, he'll put his name on too, And there's other groups out there that do the same and put their little stamps on it. And I don't know. It's fine. I don't know. You really can't take claim to something that you pulled off the internet, copy pasted, and put your stamp on it. It does take a lot of time and effort for them to do that. And I appreciate the time and effort that they spend in doing that to help others 100%. So I'm not going to knock that at all. But a lot of other sites don't like, man. A lot of other sites don't like advertising other sites like that, so they don't like putting those recipes, with all the different names in them. And I can understand that. So I'm going to try to tend towards books, which is where most of these recipes were copy and pasted from originally anyway. I can open this book up and I can see different recipes, and I can look up and down lists of all these other sites that post recipes of their own and their own recipe, and it's verbatim. And the reason being, is everybody still here? Holy shit. I don't know what I just hit, but I thought everybody's still here. Somebody say something. All right, somebody say something. Oh shit. I didn't shut down. What the hell did I grab my mouse and hit the button? I don't know what I hit. Y'all still here? Hello? Okay, good. Damn. Man, I don't know what the hell I hit, but I thought I just ended the stream somehow. Shit, it freaked me out. All right, so here we go. Damn, that was crazy. I don't know what the hell happened there. What did I hit, man? I mean, I hit the mouse, and I don't know what. I'm glad it wasn't on end string, because that would have been horrible. But all right, so this is what I was wanting to open up. Where was I talking about? Potassium atom, potassium metabisulfate. So it'll tell you how much to add, and it basically you're going to add it right before you add your pectic enzymes, right? And it's used in place. I just like using 160 plus degree water, because that pretty much will kill off any wild yeast and most bacterias that you have to deal with. Not all, but it'll take care of lacto and any of that type of thing. And Frankie, absolutely, brother. We're going over start to finish of making brandy. Not any specific fruit in general, but you can apply what I'm talking about to any mash that you want to make, or brandy that you want to make. So absolutely, we're talking about that today. That you're joined in the right time. Actually, a little bit late, so you might have to rewind and catch the beginning. And we talk about all the way from sourcing fruit, right, to putting it in the freezer, and how to break up all the cells so you get all your juice out of it, to add your pectic enzymes, to yeast selections, to adding. Right now we're talking about pouring the boiling water over the fruit to kill off any wild yeast or any bacteria or anything like that. So we're in the process of talking, from beginning to end, how to make a mash for a wine or a brandy. So perfect episode for you to come on and ask you questions. And yeah, we're going over that now. So for you, blackberry, you'll do the same. You'll, on the chart here, 4 to 6 pounds of blackberries per gallon of water. Maybe a little light if you want a heavy flavored wine. Might be a little heavy if you want to use some sugar and save some money. So that's the trade-off. You can use more fruit and concentrate your sugars with just pure fruit juice, or you can use a little less fruit and use some fruit juices and sugar to help compensate. So that's the trade-off. Some people say it's not a true brandy if you add sugar. I'm not so sure that that's a TTB thing or anything like that. I think that's just somebody that said that. I don't know that that's a given rule. A lot of people say it is. I've never seen it on any rule sets for brandies. It's probably a good practice, but we've established. But there's a lot of fruits that it's going to be pretty tough, like strawberries. I don't give a fuck how many strawberries you put in there. You are not going to have enough sugar. You can continue to add strawberries, and you're going to still have the gravity that a strawberry gives you. And they're not. My first time with strawberries, I was blown away. I was like, "Are you kidding me? There's not much sugar in a fucking strawberry." And now I see why people dip them in sugar to eat them with. I think I have maybe some mild allergies with strawberries. I love them. I grew up eating them. I love them. But there's just not a lot of sugar in them. They're just twice as much sugar as a lemon. So, and less than a grapefruit. So, strawberries, I don't care how many strawberries you put in that juice, unless you add some frozen concentrate or some sugared up strawberry juice, you are not going to have enough sugar to make it worth your while. So, you're going to have to add sugar. So, blackberry, it's not got a lot of sugar. Blueberries, blackberries are decent, but still, not up there with peaches, raspberries. Some of the higher sugar content fruits that tend to see these right here. You can pretty much depend on those alone for their sugars, right? But when you're in the middle or low, you're going to probably have to add sugars to some of these to make it worth the while. You don't have to, but you're going to get more production when you do. So we've selected our fruit. Now I will say how you macerate your fruit depends on the fruit. Grapes, you don't want to just mulch those up. Blueberries, you don't want to mulch those up. Bananas, you want to get the strings out before you mash them. Apple peels, some people don't like the apple peels. They like peeling their apples before they add it. Looking at some of these others here. So there's certain things that you need to remove, like the skins. Your grape skins can be bitter. Your banana strings can be bitter. Maybe even some cherry skins. So some of those skins on some of your fruits can cause bitterness, and that's why when people stomp grapes, they're basically mashing them. You've seen the bare-feet people walking around on the grapes. That's so after they use the pectic enzymes to separate it, first thing you're going to do is skim off all those. Yeah. So you can skim off all that bitterness. And, some people like some of the bitter in their wine and, and like that tartness. So some people leave them. But with the white grapes, probably not as critical as the dark grapes. But yeah, I take out my grape skin. So after I add the pectic enzymes and let that sit overnight or for a day or two, and all that mushy's gone, and all that's left is a bunch of skins, man. And I mean, I just take the strainer in there and just skim off all the stems and dump them out. Any grape, seeds or any of that. If I don't, you just have seedless grapes. So, and the banana strings, it's the same way. So a lot of the skins and stuff can cause, a lot of bitterness that you just want to go ahead and get out of there. Grapes is definitely one of them. So let's go back to the other chart though. I like this one, and this is not set in stone. This is just a general guide that I pulled off the internet. This is not something that I've experimented and found. This is just a general guide to help get you started. And once you do your mashes, you can adjust these numbers. With your hydrometer, you can say, well, I used 4 pounds of blueberries, and they were frozen blueberries. I picked them fresh. And I used 4 pounds, and I needed more, to get that sugar level I needed. So maybe I'm gonna add 6. That way I don't have to add sugar, or maybe I just add sugar and stick with with a little bit less. That's all something that you can dial in. This is just a general guide to get you a start, to get that hydrometer in the water. And do I need to add more fruit to this, or do I need to add some sugar to this? What am I going to add? A little less water? I'm not going to water it down any more than this. These are all decisions that you can make. It's called Grappa. It's called pumice, Clint. I've made a lot of Grappa, and that's one of my, I guess if I had a famous things that everybody loves the most. It's my grappa. A lot of people that's tried it, and I'm not tooting my own horn, but a lot of people try it. Some say it's the best thing they've ever drank in their life. Some people like that's the top 10. It's in a lot of people's top 10. I'm proud of it, but it does take 2 years to make, and it's not something. I mean, I make an official wine before I ever distill it. So this is a full-bodied wine that's aged for over a year, and then it gets distilled. So it's not something that as soon as I'm done with the secondary fermentation after a month or something that I do. No, I let that sucker sit for a year, and I've got some blackberry in there that sat for close to a year now. So it's gonna be good. But yeah, that's generally made with pumice. Now I did last time I did my grappa. I made it both ways. I did it with just my grape juice from the juice of the grapes, and then I took the stems and the pumice and all that. I didn't use pectic enzymes on that one. No, no, no. I'm wrong. This was the one before that. Last one I used too much pectic enzyme because I was away, and I had Ann at it, and she added a tablespoon instead of teaspoon, and I had to let that go for a long time. It wasn't as good, but the time before that, when I did my grappa, I did both traditional with the pumice, and then I did it with just the grape juice that I got from the pumice, right? Night and day. Grappa made with skins and stems and pumice basically sucks. It's there's not a lot of sugar in it. It takes a lot of sugar to add to it. So basically, it's a stem and skin and a little bit of meat pulp to the grape flavored sugar shine, and it's not that great. For people, it was made by peasants in Italy and Spain and France. I think Italy might be where it originated. They would the vineyard owners would employ a lot of peasants, people that worked in the towns, and they would give them the pumice when they finished, and all the people that worked in the vineyards, they called them peasants. They would give them the pumice, and they would take it home, and they'd add some sugar to it, and make their own wines with it, and they would distill it into what is now known as a grappa. That's the origins of grappa. All right, brother. Hey, Mitch, brother, you can watch this video anytime. In fact, I say 90% of the people that watch this broadcast watch it later on the way to work. They'll listen to it or whatever. So we'll be on all the popular channels. You can catch up later. I know a lot of people that come in late, they want to catch the beginning. You just watch it. Just watch it from the beginning. You can catch up on what you missed later. Thanks for stopping in. And yeah, we'll all have to tune into the news here before long. I'll probably maybe cut it off a little early to see what's going on in the world. But, no matter what, I'll still be drinking. That's 100 proof. That tastes like water compared to the other shit I've been drinking. All right, take it easy, bitch. So the traditional grappa sucks. I'm just going to put it out there. It's not that good. I didn't like it. It's harsh. It's a sugar shine that's flavored with the stems and pumice. It's okay. I shouldn't say it sucks compared to the grappa, compared to what's made with a good, a wine juice or a good grape juice that's a wine. Yeah, that's the way you want to go. So, unless if you can do like I don't know, Mark and Digger did this. They went to a winery and on the show, and they got the whole truckload. I guess they put it in a whole tote full of I think strawberries might be. Well, you're gonna have to add sugar. Yeah, 3.5. I think. Yeah, I think that's just for the wines and stuff. But yeah, I agree. It's when you look at that chart, next to this chart, strawberry, banana. You couldn't get further the scale, and then you look here, banana 3 to 5, strawberry 3 to 5. You know, there's gonna be some sugar added for sure. So I don't know if this is just because it has enough flavor with 3 to 5, and this is also adding sugar to make the wine. So they're not necessarily all caught up on a non-sugared brandy. But I agree, and this is a chart that just gets you started. And if anything's off, let me know. I mean, I didn't make this chart. This is just something I pulled from the internet. Uh, I did check it, on some of the fruits that I use, and it's fairly consistent. But I'll have to look and see on my strawberry champagne what I used. I never really looked at any of this when I make mine. So, but this is just a general guide. But excellent observation. I agree 100%. But I would say you probably definitely need more strawberries. And I'd say that's close to being ripe for bananas. But yeah, with strawberries, you're going to have to add sugar anyway, because I mean, there's just nothing, there's no sugar in it. So I would say, what do they have lemon on here? Let's see, do they have any of the other? Let's see, which the avocado, lime, strawberry, grapefruit, figs, blueberries, and plum. Blueberries 2 to 4. See that, there's not a lot of sugar in those either, so you'd need more. Plums, same 4 to 6. I think this is just a general guide. I don't remember where I got this, but I think it's fairly decent to start. But you're definitely gonna have to add sugar to a lot of these. But I think too, it might have to do with getting the flavor out of the fruit, and it's less focused on sugars than it is flavors. I do know it doesn't take a lot of strawberry to get a good strawberry flavor. Um, I don't have my recipe book handy, but I'll check mine and see what I use. I've got a bunch of notes that I take, and when I do my strawberry wine, or actually champagne, but I wanted to do strawberry wine, and it ended up really fucking dry because I had no idea that there was so little sugar in it. But I added the sugar to it, and then I used DC1118, and it finished dry as fuck. I mean, it's dry, brute, blanc, dry. And it makes it's sparkling. It foams up like champagne, and oh yeah, remember those are some panty slippers. There's that panty slipper champagne. That's it. But all the girls loved it, so did I. But I liked it better than beer. I was never really a big beer drinker. I always made a Boilermaker with it, dropped it in, had to have a little whiskey with mine. But yeah, Grappa, true traditional Grappa, I'm not a big fan of. So where were we? Oh yeah, we were just adding hot water versus potassium metabisulfate. So some of your recipes are going to call for you to crush up Camden tablets, and that's just a potassium metabisulfate. That's just used to kill everything off, wild yeast, bacteria, all this other stuff. And I guess they use it if you don't want to pour that 160 plus degree water over it or juice over it. I think it's a pretty good practice to add that hot juice. Some may say it's ruining the character of the grape, and it's ruining the wine. You don't want to add that temperature. It ruins it. So for all those snobs, maybe potassium metabisulfate would be to go. There's browbeaten snobs out there, man. You talk about, making shortcuts or changes to, traditional wine recipe, man, they'll browbeat you to death. I frequented those sites and learning brandies and stuff, because there's really no better place to learn how to make a brandy than to learn how to make a good wine. The best way to learn how to make a good wine, you're welcome, brother, is to get on the internet and get into some of these big time winemakers, and pick their brains and learn from them. I'm not, and I got a local guy that makes wine. We go pick fruit from, and he taught me the process and everything that they do, and I shared a little bit of my knowledge with him, and I'd like to talk to him maybe about maybe making some brandy or something with them. That'd be pretty interesting. Kind of open up. They're real cool, chill people, man. They're awesome people. So a lot of people may not want that hot boiling water over their grapes. That might ruin the character. It might change something. It might cause a congener or something, or a bad flavor later or something that I don't know about. There's some people out there that would say definitely use your potassium sulfate. Don't listen to me. 160-degree water over a strawberry who does this, that, and affects the flavor, and all this. It very well may, but I know it kills wild yeast and bacteria, and that's my major concern. So there may be different ways to do it. There's certainly, none of this is facts. It's just the way I do it. So that's the thing about making wines and distilling and stuff and beers. There's very few facts and a lot of opinions. There are good, better, best options a lot of times. And hold on, let me holler. And turn on the TV. I guess we bombed Iran, and we're at war with Iran now, and I think Trump's getting ready to speak on it. So turn on Fox and let's see what's going on. All right. So we're going to try to accelerate this. I've been mulling over the same thing for a while now. Yeah, that's right. You have to make a good wine before you really make a good brandy. Now, I will say this. Some of my mistakes in wine have made some really good brandy. So, and that's one of the criteria whether mine goes from being a wine to a brandy is if it makes a great wine, it stays in a great wine. But if it's just not what I want as a wine after about 6 months, 8 months, like my blackberry's been there about probably 10 months now, 8 to 10 months. If it doesn't make a good wine, then I'm going to probably go ahead and it's in secondary. And we'll go ahead and make a brandy of it. That's just if it's good wine, I bottle it. And if it's not, then I'll make a brandy. But sometimes I make it specifically for brandy, and there's just no question it's going to be a brandy from the very get go, and like the Waterman I'm fixing to do. So we poured the hot water over it. We've put the pectic enzymes in there. We've allowed that to sit in the water, right? 5.3. We're going to go ahead and adjust that with citric acid. That way, when it's time to add the yeast, unless we're doing lemons, we should have a pretty good, pH. We should be pretty close. So you're not going to have to, buffer it or add anything to it to get it. If you're going to drop your pH, use citric acid. If you're going to raise it, at this point, it's still okay to use baking soda because we haven't used any yeast yet, right? So baking soda, if there's no yeast in there, you can use that to raise. Or if there is yeast in there and it's early on, it's okay because oxygen is okay on day one because we want to. We're going to stir the fuck out of that. I'm going to get there in a minute. But so we've got all that ready. We've got the pectic enzymes in there. They worked off a couple of days. We're checking our pH now. We've already added the sugar. We've already added as much sugar as we want. We did that. We've got our gravity where we want it, the 1080 or wherever we want, 10, 70, 80, 90, whatever you got going on, how much sweetness you want left at the end. If you want to, we'll get in that in a minute. So we're adding now the yeast. We've talked about yeast, which one's best. That's an opinion. So we've added our selected yeast. We're going to start our yeast though. We don't just dump our yeast in there. No. Every time you use yeast, you want to start with some warm water. And that means water that is just about body temperature, but not quite. So around 90, 95. Warm water, but not hot. You don't want it, if it feels warm to your skin, it's hotter than 98.1. If it feels cool to your skin, probably a little bit over. If it doesn't feel either way, it's pretty close to 98. So you want it a little cooler than skin temperature. So if it feels a little cool, you can check your temp. Doesn't have to be exact, but it's best to use a little bit warm water, but not warm to touch. So when I say warm, people tend to think, oh, it's warm to touch. It's 107 degrees. You might kill your yeast. So let's, 90, 95-ish in a jar with, do a big quart jar, half-gallon jar, depending on how much yeast you're using, gallon. Put your warm water in there. You don't want chlorinated water. That can cause some immediate stress on the yeast. And chlorine or chloramine, both. So we've got our water. It's 90 degrees, let's just say. We're going to go ahead and dump our yeast into that. We're going to take half a cup of sugar, quarter cup of sugar, depending on how much, right? And we're going to shake the hell out of that. We're going to leave the lid off. We're going to put it in a bucket, and we're going to set it in a cool, dark place, or a warm, dark place. And cover it with a towel, the bucket with a towel. You definitely want that bucket because sometimes it will foam over. So let it sit and keep an eye on it. Watch it every few minutes, and it's going to foam up if it's good. If it's good, viable yeast, it will start foaming up and it'll almost overflow out of your jar, right? That's what you want to add to your mush. So you're going to use some distilled water, rinse your jar out, make sure you get it all out of there, and that's making a yeast starter, right? And now we're going to add some nutrients. So we're going to add our needed nutrients to that. You can add that directly into the must, and now it's time to stir. When you stir this, I use a mud mixer on a drill. Now, the reason why it's okay to use baking soda from the beginning is because baking soda causes things to oxidate very, very rapidly. So if you need to boost your pH up a little bit, you can add it now because we want to oxygenate. We want our mash to be super oxygenated because this high oxygen content it's an aerobic environment, and we want this aerobic environment for our yeast on day one because yeast in an aerobic environment reproduce, right? So when they got all this oxygen, they're oxygen drunk, happy, and they're reproducing like crazy, man. They reproduce. That's their focus is on reproduction. So absolutely. So they start reproducing in this heavy oxygen. So you get your drill, you got that mud mixture, you're going to town on it, get to the top, chop it up. You want it to have foam. You want it to have oxygen bubbles all the way through it. You want it to be bubbling like crazy. So you stir it on high, vigorously as you can to super oxygenate that water. That's what you want. You don't necessarily want to add baking soda because the salts in it aren't good. So that's only a must if you have a low pH. But hopefully it'll be fine. But better things to adjust pH with, pickling lime works well. And that's a calcium hydroxide. And the hydroxide will add the oxygen, but you don't have the salts from the sodium bicarbonates that are in baking soda, right? So you don't have that sodium element in there, and yeast don't really care for the sodium because that kills them and it stresses them. But the potassium hydroxide or the pickling lime, the potassium hydroxide will work fine because it's doesn't have the sodium in it. Best thing to use though is calcium carbonate. Maybe no calcium hydroxide. Yeah, calcium hydroxide for the pickling lime. But we know our oyster shells that we talk about all the time. Get those oyster shells, boil them up, have them ready, crush them up a little bit so you get a little more surface area. You don't want the powder. That's just something you have to deal with later. Won't hurt, but I generally take the powder and put that in a gallon jug and try to get it dissolved as best as possible. because that's something that you can add later if you want to, but it's never going to boost pH up real quick. It just buffers. So we put those crushed oyster shells in our little cheesecloth, and we tie it up, throw it in there, and what happens is it doesn't boost the pH. It won't raise the pH hardly at all, like a baking soda will or a pickling lime will. This is a buffer. So basically, the only way it works is if something gets acidic enough to eat away at it, it slowly buffers those acids. So as those acids eat away, calcium is released, and as a result, it hardens and it also pH comes up. So it helps neutralize the acid instead of raising pH directly. So it just helps neutralize the acid some. All right, brother, take it easy. And yeah, just watch. You know, you can pick up these broadcasts later if you don't get to watch them all. If you want to hear this, because this is good. I want to try to do it beginning to end. So if you want to, you know, kind of follow these instructions beginning to end, maybe watch the video again and or right before you do it. So or just write down, you know, the steps. I know I keep going back and forth, and I'm kind of I try to go back a little bit for the people that tuned in late. So. That's why I'm rehashing a lot of stuff over and over. So where were we? Oh, yeah, we're now at the point we're adding our nutrients and we're adding our oyster shells. I'm glad I got my little bullets. I have to keep my finger on where I'm at. Now you see why. But I got a little ADD, man. My mind will just wander off on tangents, and I have to. So now we've already added our nutrients. We've added our eggshells, our oyster shells. You can use eggshells, but I use that in plants and stuff because I don't have to worry about. I do go ahead and boil those and you can bake them in the oven, but I use the oyster shells. Hey, that works. That works. You know what? You know what those pantyhose are also good for? I cut little pieces of them off and I use them to tie my tomatoes up to the cages, and that works real well because the plant can still breathe through that spot that you tie them with, so it doesn't, you know, kill them off or cause issues. And if it sags a little bit, it's got a little give to it, and it's wide, so it's not all in one spot and cause it just to fall over and break at that point. You know, it's wider, so it helps support. They work pretty well, man. But just make sure your neighbors ain't over there sniffing you damn pantyhose. You know? That's funny. All right, so we've added all that. We're stirring it up vigorously. We're vigorously stirring. We've already checked our gravity. We've already checked our pH. We've already added our nutrients. We've added our oyster shells. No, we haven't added our oyster shells. We've stirred the shit out of it. Then you add your oyster shells. You don't want to. Yeah, they got a little bit of flex, and you don't want to tie it up real fine, but you can kind of fan it out. So on the branch, it's got a little wide base, so it doesn't just break over the string. If you use like twine, it'll break over the twine. But these, you make a little hammock, and it doesn't break your little secret there you learned today. You know, they work real well for tomatoes and other things you tie up. So not your old lady though. I guess they work well for that too. You would tie that up. Necktie. Is soft. So now we've got it ready. You know, we've got our mash ready. We're going to cover it up. Some people will use an airlock. I recommend them. They're cheap, easy to use. If you're going to make a wine, I think it's needed. It's, you know, people say you don't have to have it. No, you don't have to. But you don't want oxygen on your wine. A, it makes it stale tasting, and B, it can promote bacteria. Oxygen enriched, environments. We want our must, now that it's after day one, we want our must to be anaerobic, which means we don't want any oxygen in there. We want it to have a lack of oxygen, because without the oxygen, bacteria growth it's not It won't happen as readily, and a lot of bacteria discouraged from growing because most require more of an oxygen-rich environment to grow. So we want an anaerobic environment. Um, People ask about pushing your cap down. It's fine to, they call it punching. Don't mean to sit there and beat on your cap now. It's just gently pushing your cap down, and you want to keep that cap moist. So you can take your bucket lid off or whatever. You can put you can put a towel over it if it's something that, like a grain or something that you're not going to do a secondary or just for primary. You can, this is going to be a wine you're going to drink. So we're looking at brandy. If it's a wine, it should go in an airlock, period. That's it. And it's not just to keep it from turning to vinegar, which can happen. You can get fruit flies in there that carry acetobacters, and that will promote the growth of acetic acid, which is one of the organic acids I talk about. That is a natural process and created naturally in the fermentation process. So it will create acetic acids. That's that organic acid that we talk about a lot. So that's pretty much going to be in there anyway. It's on the fruit, it's in the air. We've tried our best to get rid of it with boiling water, potassium metabisulfate, everything we can, but sometimes it's still going to carry through. We've cleaned all our stuff. We keep our fermenters clean. We try to use tar sand and keep everything sanitized. And this is winemaking. I know a lot of distillers and a lot of moonshiners and stuff that say all this is not necessary, and it's not necessary at all. If you don't care about your wine being oxygenated and kind of flat and less flavorful, that's fine. It's not a requirement. You don't have to do it. But if you want a top-notch product, it's probably a better practice to use it. You just don't want oxygen on your wine. That's why, they've got these little, in wine bottles, they got these things, pump all the oxygen out of the bottle if you're going to try to cork it and save it for a few days, because that little bit of oxygen tastes horrible. That's why all our fermenters that we use come to a small top. That way, when you're doing secondary fermentation, that small cap has very little. That's why it gets smaller at the top. It forces all that oxygen in that area for space for any kind of gas to, be there off. So, yeah, the carboys, in the thing have a small lid for a reason, and they don't want all that airspace in there. They want it to be filled with carbon dioxide, what little airspace you do have. And it's because you don't want oxygen on your wine, because it will make it have a bad off flavor, period. It's not just because of acetobacters. It's not just to keep bacteria out. It does all these things, but it's also to keep oxygen off your wine, because oxygen just doesn't do it. Yeah, absolutely. And that's because the copper, the sulfites bond to copper. And that's why we use copper steels, especially in, or copper mesh. Those sulfides bond to that and readily. They definitely jump right out of that solution and bond to that copper like no tomorrow, because it's just perfect bond for them. And I guess they call it a valence electrons, the way the electrons are in the outer shell, and in bonding, they bond readily to copper. So yeah, it's almost like magnetically drawn to it, man. And so, which is why which is really critical to have some copper in the vapor path when you do, especially like with. I've noticed that when I do dark grapes, I get a lot more, sulfides with that than I do white grapes. So it depends on even grains. You're going to get some sulfurs in some of your grains. It's just a part of the process. It's a metabolism of the yeast that causes it. And yeah, it's in there. It's in the plant. It's just a byproduct of the process, and it's a metabolite of the yeast, eating, and that's just a given. So having a little bit of copper in the vapor path is essential in removing some of those flavors. Now, I will say some people in their their grape wines will get that flavor, and you know, some people like that. You know, not me. So, but that's distilling it. But for the wine itself, if you wanted to put some copper in there to bond to that, excellent idea. You can, um, yeah, yeah, you can drop you some of that mesh in your wine too, or just pour it through that mesh, or pour it in your copper cup and drink it. You know, all those things will help remove those sulfides for sure. I got you, brother. So where were we? Oh yeah, we vigorously stirred. We're capping it. Use airlocks. If you have it, use it. They're you get like 3 for $5, $8 on Amazon. You can make them simply with tubes and 2-liter bottles. It's just anything, or basically, if you take a towel and you've got like a bucket, you take a towel and put over it, and then you loosely fit that lid over top of that towel, and you're basically not making it air. You can't lock it, right? You don't want to, or it's going to explode. But if I'm not saying put your lid all the way down. So once once you do that, carbon dioxide is going to build up inside your fermenter, right? And it's going to force all the oxygen out. It will force the oxygen out. So as it builds up, it's forcing oxygen out. And as your oxygen is getting forced out, you created an anaerobic environment, and that's what we want. And no bacteria is going to build up. So now we're in primary fermentation, right? So we're going to let primary fermentation go, and it's going to continue until your hydrometer, and we're using the hydrometer, again the triple scale, not a proofing, the triple scale hydrometer, and it's going to tell us how much sugar, and we can kind of watch that. Now, if we're making wine and we want it to be kind of sweet, when we get to that 1.010 or 1.005 or something like that, if you want to add your potassium metabisulfate and kill the yeast, you can do it then. And if you want to add, there's also something else you can add. It's called potassium no sorbate, potassium sorbate. And what that basically does is it neuters your yeast. So it doesn't kill them, but it makes it where they can't reproduce anymore. So it's basically neutering them, right? And so it's preventing them from reproducing. So they just live out their life and then they die. And then you can back sweeten it if you want to, and you don't have to worry about the fermentation process starting back up if you used enough of the potassium metabisulfate or the potassium sorbate, because either A, your yeast is dead, or B, they can't reproduce. They'll eat what sugar they can, then they die, and then there's just no more yeast because they couldn't reproduce. So either way, if you want to make a sweeter wine, or you want your must to finish a little on the sweeter side, um, for a wine, that's fine. And for distilling, it's good. Sometimes I've talked to quite a few professional distillers that do this for a living, that make brandies for a living, that have, gold awards. I'm not talking about, you know, moonshiner Bob down the street. These are from people who have done this all their life and have won prestigious awards. I'm not saying their opinion is even better than Bob's, but they got more experience with it, and they know what it takes to make something top notch, top shelf. So they say that, having a little bit of sweeter wine going into fermentation is sometimes better than having a dry, like we talked about before. Even with your grains, if it gets real dry, that can carry over into your distillation, and your distillate. You can definitely tell if it was a real dry wine or a dry grain mash if you allow it to get real dry. Not that that's bad. It's just that you can tell, and it's a little bit different, right? So some people like a dry wine. Some people hate them. Some people like sweet. Some people like the bitter. It's all according to taste. There's no facts here. This is all just opinions, right? So, um, sometimes you want it. But getting back to pressing the cap and punching the cap down, you want to keep that cap moist the first 3 or 4 days. It helps get a lot of the juices and flavors from a lot of the pulp and stuff that's left uh, into the must or the liquid, so the yeast can get at it. So but alcohol from the liquid will also help. What's going on, Dark Next? What's up, brother? Toby telling his bad jokes again. Yeah, I think you better put it away, buddy. But anyway, keeping that cap moist, it keeps alcohol on it, so that alcohol will also help prevent any kind of bacterial buildup. Because right there on the very top surface of that cap is where you get a bacterial buildup, if any, because it's coming in contact with what little or any oxygen. Um, yeah, we can talk about fuel. Yeah, we can talk about fuel making sometime for sure. Yeah, it's a lot easier. It's a hell of a lot easier. Making fuel, it's a damn lot easier. It's just straight corn, sugar, and turbo, baby. But yeah, we'll talk about that sometime if you want to. So anyway, pressing this cap down, keeping it moist. Keeping it moist helps trap oxygen. Okay, so or I'm sorry, helps trap the carbon dioxide that's coming off the yeast, right? Because that's part of the byproduct of the fermentation product process. So as the yeast are eating, you've got all this carbon dioxide coming off. So if that cap's kind of moist, it's harder for them to penetrate than if it's just dry and porous, right? So it helps keep the porosity down of your cap. So there's a lot of benefits from keeping that cap moist for the first 4 days, 5 days of fermentation. Probably shouldn't take more than a week or two to do. But I mean, there's nothing wrong with keeping it moist throughout the whole time. You just want to try to don't stir it up, don't mix it up, just keep it moist. Just press it down till you see liquid, press it down till you see liquid, press it, press it, put your cap back on it, and you're done. And then of course the CO2 will build up and force out whatever oxygen got in there out. It's not going to be that bad. But once it starts dropping, then it's okay to just leave it alone and leave the cap on or leave the lid on. It does something similar. Yeah, it does something similar. It keeps the CO2. It helps keep it trapped in there, but it also um, you don't want oxygen at the top of the cap. So when you take it off there, gently punch it. It's going to be moist. It's going to, the alcohol in there hopefully will kill a lot of that bacteria off, and then we're going to put the lid back on, put our airlock back on, and then or keep it to where most everything can blow off, but it still hold uh, some positive pressure in there, I guess. So you're going to build up pressure, and it's going to force it out around the lid and the towel, if that's what route you want to do. Some people just use a towel. That's fine to keep the bugs out. Um, and for like grains or for something that you're not going to make a wine out of. So if you're going to make a brandy immediately when it's done, and you're not going to go into secondary fermentation to make a wine, a true wine before and get that full body, yeah, you could probably get by with that. But if you have the airlocks, use them. I mean, what's the person having? You don't need to use them. But make sure that you leave yourself plenty of headspace. Especially if you're using, doing stuff like bananas. Because those, man, they can make a huge cap, and you don't want to come in and have to clean stuff off the ceiling because it just blew your airlock off and the rest of it, you got shot straight up into the ceiling and all over it, man, because I've seen it. So yeah, the cap does help, and that's what actually helps form the cap is all those CO2 bubbles forcing a lot of solids to the top. And of course, that's one of the things that helps create the cap itself. So after a couple of weeks, we've dropped our hydrometer in there, and we're at 1.010 or 1.005. And we're going to do a secondary fermentation. Now we're going to take the lid off. We're going to rack all of those clears in that bucket and in the fermenter, whatever you're using. We're going to siphon. When we talk about racking off, we're using an approved hose. It's not a garden hose. It's a specific type of nylon that's used that's alcohol is not reactive to. Okay, and they I think what's the name of that? Trying to think of the name brand that I used on mine. It's Brewer's Best or something like that. I can't think of the damn name. Getting too damn old to remember all every details, but something perfect. Anyway, it's used for the transportation. A lot of these breweries and stuff, they'll have kegs in the back, and they use these hoses to go to the taps. It's the same thing that they use. Um, but it's a hose and just siphon it. So you're taking it. You can see your clears. I've got I use the big 5 gallon for a lot of my wines. I'll use these big 5 gallon water jugs, right? And the number 10 stopper with a hole in it. I drill out, make it bigger, and put my airlock in that. Um, I've got some in there. I don't want to carry them in here. They're full of blackberry. I don't want to. They're in secondary. I don't want to interrupt them. But it's just the same ones they turn upside down in the office thing. You can use that. Always use sheets over barrels of mash and a rope bungee cord to keep the nasties out. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean that's fine, especially Clint. It's great and perfectly fine for if you're not, you don't do that in secondary for like 8-10 months though, right? You're just doing that for grains and for brandies that as soon as they finish fermenting, you go ahead and make a brandy of it, right? But if you're going to do wine and you're going to let it sit for long periods of time, you really need that airlock, and you need to not just use airlock, you got to go in there and refill them, and I do know a lot of people that'll put heads inside that airlock. I will say that attracts those damn flies more than anything, and they'll get in there and it'll kill them. So if you want to make a fly trap and an airlock, you can put some heads in there. Or you can just put some neutrals in there or something to kill them off. I know a lot of people that do that. I just tend to use water. It seems to work okay, but it probably cut back on my fruit fly problem if I did that. But but yeah, doing the blanket method is perfectly fine for grains. Of course, you don't have to use an airlock on grains. Just keeping shit out of there, and the bugs out and the animals and critters out, and yeah, that's fine. And keep your CO2 in there. It's fine. Keep your yeast happy. All works. That works fine. If you just want to loosely fit the lid back over it, that works too. To help hold some in a little bit more. But yeah, 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 I agree. Wines, especially for secondary. If you're going to ferment in secondary and make an actual wine before it goes to the brandy, absolutely. Most people don't do that. Most people take their uh, what I call raw brandy out of primary fermentation directly into the distiller and distill it. And those make an okay brandy and decent brandy. But yeah, it is. But sometimes you don't want it. Sometimes with the airlock, it can get back suctioned in. When you take the lid off or something, might have a little reverse pressure or negative pressure in there, and it might suck it in or something. But it should be fine. Doesn't have to be. It probably be fine. Just use water. I do know it kind of gets grungy, so maybe that sanitizer is a good idea because if you're using the cup type um, airlock instead of the spirally one that has the plastic S, like the P trap. Those are hard to clean. I like the cup ones a little better. They're easier to clean, but they do dry out quicker. So you have to add water to them, and that's the trade off. And let me see if I can grab a couple of those real quick. I'll show you what I'm talking about. All right, this is the spiral kind I'm talking about. Those are hard to clean. This is the cup type, and that's what I'm using, so I got to put it back in there. This is a lot easier to clean and just as effective, but that's the cup type. Get those. These are work just as fine, but they're harder to clean. These water evaporates out of quicker though, so you have to. Let me put this back on there. I had that one on one of my blackberry wines in there. Yeah, I use pipe cleaners. That's what I do. Yep. Yeah, they're a little tougher to clean, but I found the cup ones. I love those. That's all I'm gonna use from now on. They're a lot easier to clean, and you can just you can if you have like a bucket and you just want to put a little hole. You can take a hose. The same hose I siphon with is like a 3/4 inch hose. You can make a 3/4 inch hose, stick that hose in there, and just have it going up and into a 2 liter jug of water. Works just as fine. You know, and that's the old way of doing it. There you go. I didn't see it. Yep, yep. 5 gallon bucket, or yeah, that works. Especially when you start, if you start fermenting like a 40 gallon fermenter, one of these things is going to blow the lid off. So you have to kind of make a little bit bigger um, airlock for if you're doing like 50, 100 gallons. Or like if you're doing if you're doing a tote, I don't think that's it would probably shoot the fucking cat and water out of it. But yeah, it's I found the 2 liter and a hose works. And if you get real big, yeah, you can use a garden hose and a bucket. Any of that works just fine. Really. So we're going to rack off though. So we're ready. We're ready. We're done. Fermentation. We're going to rack off our clears. We're going to rack it into a secondary fermenter, right? So you got another one of these 5 gallon water jugs, right? The light blue ones, they sell them. At the office they turn them upside down for these little water coolers. Those are perfect. And if you want to get one of those, a number 10 stopper, number 10 fits in it perfectly, and you can get one with a hole, but usually the hole is too small, so you can drill it out. Oh yeah, hell yeah! When you get 50 gallons, or like a tote, you don't want to fit an airlock on a tote, but you do want to have some sort of airlock if you're going to do long fermentation, secondary. So some people at this stage, they're what I'm talking about, racking into a secondary ferment. For a lot of people, if you're just going to make a strict brandy and you're not going to see what the wine tastes like or get a mature wine before you make it a brandy, you can just rack it directly into your distiller. I would recommend doing the secondary process, and you'll see why in a minute. So rack off the clears. Now, after you rack off the clears, you're going to have that yeast bed, and you're going to have a little bit of liquid in there, and you're going to have some pulp, what's left of the pulp, skins, fruit, whatever that you didn't skim off. So you can take all that and let it sit, right? And let that sit. You can you can probably get your brew bag, and right, you can squeeze it out with your mop strainer, and strain all your liquids off that way. You can get the little spinner. I've seen them use the little you know spinner. I guess it's uh, uses a centrifugal force to get to get, yeah, yeast and lees, trub. There's a lot of terminology for it, but it's basically yeast bed. I just call it yeast bed for most people. It's got trub in it, lees, and it's got a little bit of everything in there. But you can press it out and get everything you can out of there. Save that if you want to, use it for a nutrient, because we've got nutrients in there, and they're going to continue to be in there. And you've got dead yeast, which is also a nutrient. So you can use that as a throw that into you got a sour mash going or something like that, flavor it up a little. You can throw a little bit of that in there. It's not gonna hurt nothing. So we're going to rack off into a secondary fermenter. We're going to press the rest of this shit out, and it's going to be really milky. So we're going to put that back in the original. We're going to take that cake. We're going to put it in a sour mash. We're going to jar it up. You can take some distilled water and pour it into your cake, stir it up real well, and get all the alcohol out of your cake, right? And pour that distilled water off and leave all as much of that, let it settle, right? And then pour all that water off, and that'll help keep whatever yeast is in there alive, and get all the alcohol off. And you can jar that up and put it in the refrigerator. You can put a little liquid in there with it to help, put a little water in there and no sugar, and help keep it moist and going, and store it in there for long periods of time, and just whenever you need it, you can use that. And I mean, it's great it's got live yeast, and it's got nutrients in there. So you can technically start a grain mash with it or whatever, a lot of times in the old days, people didn't waste, they didn't want to go out and buy a bunch of yeast. So they bought yeast once, and they used that same yeast over and over and over and over for a long time. And they'd sour mash it and keep it going, and use that for a long period of time. Nowadays, they just pitch it and pour in fresh new yeast, Exactly. Yep. Exactly. Yeah. If you don't, yeah, if you've had the potassium metabisulfate in it, yeah, it's not it's not going to be it's not going to be have any live yeast. Um, well, that's why I'm here. Ask any question you want. That's what we're here for, brother. Pick my brain. That's what I need to change the name. Pick my brain. I like it. But so we racking off. We've got this all mixed up. We're going to press it, and then we're going to let it sit in a vessel of any sort. We're going to let it settle out again. Then we're going to rack off what we can out of that, and then we're going to be done. Right? We're after we get the second, we're going to put that in the secondary fermenter. Now here's the choices we have to make. We can either do the raw brandy now with that, or we can let that sit in secondary for 6 months, 8 months, and let it mature into a full-bodied wine, and then we can distill that wine. And for me, it's night and day. For the quality that you get out of it, if you take it to that wine stage and you do that secondary fermentation, there's so many complex chemical processes that are taking place in secondary fermentation that maturing this wine. Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's like, and another thing people don't understand is not all fruits age well over time. So there's certain wines, certain fruits that you make wines out of. You've got to drink them within the first year or two. It's not like a grape that gets better with time. Not all fruit does that. In fact, most don't. So, like for the strawberry, a couple few years, and it starts to lose its flavor and efficacy. It starts to become a little stale and a little off flavored. Peach wine, there's a lot of different wines that don't do well aging over long periods. So, that's something else to consider, that you don't want to go too long with it, or else it starts to degrade, right? So, most of your fruit wines, 6-8 months is going to be a good period to get all the activity, the yeast metabolism, because yeast are still working, even in secondary fermentation over the long haul. And that's why when you rack it over for secondary fermentation, it's okay to get a little bit of the yeast bed in there. In fact, some say it's preferable to do that because it gives them a little bit of food and everything. And it's just something going to be very little on the bottom, just a little thin at the bottom. So it's not going to be a lot, but it does give something for the yeast to eat in secondary, because there's a lot of things going on. You just don't want a lot of that yeast bit in there, because that's going to give off flavors. So a little bit for food, but a lot no. Had a strain of yeast that worked wonders for, yeah. Yeah. Well, I hate that, brother. But actually, if you use a yeast like that for that long, if you've done it in the same place, you may be able to pull some of that yeast off, just unless you clean a lot. You might be able to pull some of that yeast off the walls, unless you wipe the walls down. Um, that yeast will live on those surfaces for long periods of time. There's a lot of people that go into these old distilleries. I know Alan Bishop did a whole series on it. He went around, and I guess Bam Bam did too. After Bam Bam talked about it, and I think Bam Bam, he decided he's going to go to all these distilleries and stuff. I'm like, yeah, man, sneak your little baggie in there and get you some Q-tips, and just swab shit as you go around the distillery, and you'll pick up some of their yeast. Just put it in that bag and take it home, and you can propagate that shit, right? So, but yeah, Alan, he went to some places where there used to be distilleries, like last century, and he was getting some of their yeast from around the distillery, because that once you start doing that and that yeast gets in the air, it dominates. So you may be able to pull some of that yeast. Yeah, Quebec's great yeast, man. I've never done Quebec in wine, but I'm sure a lot of people do. I've not used a lot of it. So, and what I did use was in grain. So, and I know it works great in grain. I know it helps, grain distillations, but most people don't realize in these distilleries, they don't push that gravity up to 108.0 with their grains, and the yeast that they use, they're ready to go in 4 days, man. So it's like clockwork. They keep the conditions just the same, or as close as possible, and they replicate everything, and yeah, they ferment out in 4 days. They're ready to go. But with a wine, you're not going to do that. So, but after secondary, then you can rack after it's 6-8 months. Keep your airlocks full. You don't have to maintain them after that. You don't have to do anything in secondary. Best just let them go. Keep your airlocks filled with water or heads or sanitary solution, whatever you want to use. Just be careful not to get that in your wine, but a little bit, I'm sure, probably would hurt. Star sand, I'm pretty sure star sand won't, because you don't even have to rinse that shit out. Um, but after that, you should be, good to go. Ready to distill. You want to distill it in a whiskey cap. I don't recommend using, a lot of bubble plates and columns or anything like that. You can use your jar rigs, thumpers if you want to infuse some fruit flavors. Put some concentrate in your thumpers or jar rigs. That works out really, really well. So especially the jar rigs, or the I don't know what I'm going to call them. I keep pushing everybody to make, instead of jar rigs, just little copper, half gallon copper mini thumpers, whatever, with a port in the top and a drain in the bottom, little mini thumpers or whatever, to infuse with that. Because you can infuse with a thumper, but if you got a 5-gallon thumper, god damn, you got a gallon or two of fucking concentrates, man. That's a lot, right? And you're gonna have to change that shit over once it gets watered down. So it's a lot of concentrates to put in. But if you know condense that down to a small jar, a half-gallon jar or a half-gallon little mini thumper, it's only taking a quart or a half, to fill that sucker up with what you need, and you can definitely cut back on that. And most of us don't have 100, 200-gallon stills that would, make a 5-gallon thumper like a little mini jar rig, right? But it's best to kind of go low and slow. You want to try to carry over as much water so you can maybe speed it up a little bit. If you want to carry more water over, the hotter you go, usually the lower the proof is going to be, because um, you're putting more water right over with it. The higher the temperature, so you're gonna get more water to go over with it. But this is a good chart too if you don't have it. And if you hear about people saying they distill at 185 degrees, well, they better have 25% ABV or 50 proof mash to do that, because nothing happens at 185 unless it's that proof or higher, right? That means higher proof than proof. So a lot of people say a lot of things, and anybody that says that, they're lying to you. They never done it. But with that, use your whiskey caps, and you want it to come off at 130-40. If you can get it to come off at 130-40, that's a pretty good proof for your brandies to come off at. 140 to 60 is okayish. Anything above that, no. Anything below that, maybe. But I found that's a pretty good sweet spot. 130-40 is a good sweet spot for brandies to come off. So you want to try to encourage it to come off that. So if it's coming off at 150 and you got a big spool on top, yeah, crazy. Yeah, we're about to wrap up here, Lisa, and go watch the news. And I might have a little commentary after I'm done. But like if you got a little spool that's long before you go into an elbow or something and come down, maybe use a shorter spool, and that should increase the water that's coming through and decrease your proof, right? So maybe if you got a big whiskey cap, maybe if you used a small one, or maybe just take it out, put an elbow in, and cut back on the reflux, because you really want more water to come forward. So running it a little harder, and use a little less of something that's going to create reflux, because you want your water to come over, because water is where your flavors carry. Yeah, that Quebec works great, man. It's fast. It's really fast. All right, so we pretty much covered brandy making, wine making and brandy making. It's been a good session. It's something I've wanted to do, and maybe next time, maybe not Wednesday, but maybe Saturday, next Saturday we'll go over grains. We'll go beginning to end with grains. We'll talk about diastatic powers. We'll talk about conversions and all that good stuff. But I'm glad I got beginning to end with brandy and winemaking, and this will be a good episode for everybody to save. If you can, on Facebook, you can save this video. Definitely like and follow if you haven't already. Click that thumbs up button. I don't know, all these different ones have different ways to like. I guess Facebook will probably have a thumbs up or a heart or something you can put in there. YouTube has I'm trying to go to YouTube now, see what I can't remember anything. YouTube, I think, has here we are. I got that. But on YouTube, yeah, give it that thumbs up at the bottom, and over there you can save it. So this would probably be a good episode to save. Click that little save button, and if you want to, you can clip it and save it that way, and share it. Share it with some of your buddies. If you got some friends that make wine and or thinking about getting into doing some brandies and stuff, this is going to be a pretty good episode to save. Then maybe Wednesday, what we can do Wednesday for all those that watch this and listen to it on the way to work. Wednesday won't have any questions, because I might not have been able to address some questions tonight. And if I missed you, I'm sorry, but I really wanted to get through all this, because I know a lot of the questions that you're going to have will be answered, in something that maybe we talked about before you logged in. So it's going to be a great one to save and listen to and revert back to. And Wednesday, we're going to do a Q&A on this episode. So if you have, after you listen to this and you still have questions, bring them Wednesday and we'll go over that. And then this next Saturday, we'll do the grain thing. And then the Wednesday following that, we'll field questions about the grain thing. How about that? I think that'll work. I didn't have that idea when I started it, but I think I like the sound of that better. So so Wednesday, if y'all have questions, watch this, and if y'all have questions about it, and we're still here and our end doesn't nuke the world, we'll talk about it. If so, cheers. See y'all in hell. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Share it with a friend, like, subscribe, all that good stuff, so we get the word out. And the more we like and subscribe, the more Facebook will share it in the reels, and we might bring in some people into the hobby and encourage some people to make beer and wine and maybe take it a step further in making their own whiskeys and brandies. But appreciate y'all, and we will see you back here on Wednesday, same time, same bat channel. Peace out, and everybody go watch the news and see what's going on. Stay informed. Love y'all, and see you Wednesday. Peace out.